Amidst the jubilant atmosphere of the wedding reception, the mother-in-law took the stage to deliver her anticipated speech. However, what she uttered left the room in stunned silence. With an air of brazenness, she revealed a deeply personal detail: the bride's inability to conceive. In truth, my son knew well of her infertility, but he insisted on this union regardless. She may lack in one aspect, but she excels in her career. So begrudgingly, I consented to their marriage. The shock of her words reverberated through the hall, leaving me speechless in their wake. How could she so callously reduce a woman to her reproductive abilities and then flaunt it before our gathered guests? Oblivious to the distress she had caused, the mother-in-law surveyed the room with a smug expression, unaware of the discomfort her words had wrought. In the hushed aftermath, my name, Catherine, seemed to echo with a weighty significance. A 31-year-old professional in the dynamic realm of product development, I thrive in my career, contributing to several successful projects. Despite outward contentment, there's a secret burden I carry, one I dare not share with anyone. 5 years ago, I received the crushing news. I was infertile. The revelation left me reeling with shock and despair. In those dark days, I grappled with feelings of worthlessness and the loss of hope for any semblance of a future. Even my then boyfriend couldn't weather the storm, ultimately ending our relationship. Overwhelmed by sorrow and frustration, I threw myself into my work, seeking solace in its demands to drown out the relentless echo of despair. Looking back, I realized I was merely evading reality, clinging to the refuge of productivity to shield myself from the painful truth. Yet amidst the turmoil, a glimmer of hope emerged. Through unwavering dedication, a product I poured myself into became a resounding success, elevating my standing at work. Convinced that marriage was now beyond my grasp due to my infertility, I resigned myself to the solitary path of societal contribution through labor. Then, a serendipitous encounter altered the course of my destiny. In a routine meeting for product development, I crossed paths with David, a man my age from a client company. Little did I know he would become the harbinger of change in my life. David, the son of his company's president and head of the planning department, and I swiftly exchanged contact information. Initially, our interactions were confined to professional matters, but gradually, our conversations transcended the confines of business, blossoming into a romantic connection. In David, I discovered an unexpected reservoir of love and kindness that I had long deemed unattainable. However, the specter of my infertility loomed large, a secret I dared not disclose for fear of losing him. Yet, as our relationship deepened, the weight of my silence grew heavier, gnawing at my conscience. How could I keep such a fundamental truth from someone who regarded me with unwavering sincerity? Uncertain of the outcome, yet determined to be transparent about my condition, I braced myself for the inevitable. Summoning courage, I disclosed my infertility to David, fully prepared for the possibility of his departure. Despite my resolve, anxiety gnawed at my insides as I broached the subject. To my astonishment, David's reaction wasn't what I anticipated. Tears welled in his eyes as he offered me solace, expressing gratitude for my honesty. His unwavering kindness moved me to tears, etching the moment into my memory like an indelible mark. Contrary to my fears, our relationship only flourished after that pivotal conversation. 2 years later, on a momentous evening at a restaurant, David presented me with a small case, unveiling a ring that glittered with promise. "Catherine, will you marry me?" His unexpected proposal ignited a whirlwind of emotions within me, joy mingled with apprehension. "David, are you certain? I can't bear children. Can you truly accept that?" Though David comprehends my predicament, the weight of marriage introduces a new dimension of uncertainty. I couldn't readily say yes to his proposal, burdened by doubts. "It doesn't matter, Catherine. I want us to navigate life's challenges together, to weather every storm side by side," David reassured, acknowledging my concerns with unwavering support. In that poignant moment, tears flowed freely, a testament to the emotions swirling within me. Since the day I received my diagnosis, I never envisioned this future. Yet in David's unwavering love, I found the courage to embrace it. With certainty in my heart, I'd accepted his proposal, ready to face whatever lay ahead, as long as we faced it together. "I share your sentiment, David. Thank you for your unwavering care. I'd eagerly anticipate the journey ahead of us," I replied, gratitude laced in my words as we embarked on the path to wedded bliss. With the proposal accepted, we wasted no time in setting the wheels in motion for our impending nuptials. As a woman in her 30s, the prospect of becoming a wife ignited a sense of urgency within me, eager as I was to intertwine our lives officially. Funny how swiftly one wishes to hasten time once the promise of matrimony is extended. The reality of marriage loomed closer, heightening my anticipation with each passing moment. However, before exchanging vows, we had to confront a significant hurdle: meeting David's parents. While our encounters with them had been brief in the past, this meeting carried weight as we prepared to divulge news of our engagement. Unfortunately, the reception of our impending union was far from smooth sailing. While David's father greeted the news with joy, his mother maintained a stern countenance throughout the exchange. When the moment came for her to express her thoughts, her opposition to our marriage was palpable. "Catherine, I cannot condone your marriage to David," she declared, her disapproval evident in her demeanor. Perplexed, David interjected, seeking clarity. "Why?" he pressed, prompting his mother to elaborate. Fixing me with a steely gaze, she broached the crux of her objection. "Your inability to bear children," she stated bluntly, laying bare the very fear I had hoped to avoid. Though prepared for reproach, the directness of her words pierced me deeply, leaving me momentarily speechless. "You comprehend, don't you? David is poised to inherit the company. It's only natural that we expect his wife to bear an heir. Marrying someone incapable of fulfilling that role is out of the question," she asserted, her tone unwavering in its refusal to accept our union. Aware of David's imminent ascension to the helm of the family company, I understood the weighty expectations placed upon him, particularly the desire for him to produce an heir. Yet David's proposal to me had been made with full knowledge of these circumstances. While the prospect of not having children with him weighed heavily on my heart, our decision to marry had been a mutual one, made despite these challenges. Thus, his mother's words struck a painful chord within me, their sharpness magnified by the stark reality they laid bare. "It was me who insisted that it didn't matter," David interjected, his defense of me unwavering. "Please, mother, refrain from laying blame on Catherine. Our choices should not be disregarded in this manner," he implored, coming to my defense when words failed me. Even David's father, visibly perturbed by his wife's harsh words, expressed his discontent. "How could you utter such words?" he admonished her. Despite their protests, his mother remained resolute, her stance unchanged. "I speak the truth," she asserted defiantly before excusing herself from the table, signaling an end to the discussion. Although our conversation yielded no resolution that day, it failed to shake our steadfast commitment to each other. Determined to formalize our commitment despite his mother's resistance, we opted to register our marriage with his father's blessing. Recognizing that waiting for her approval might indefinitely delay our union, we took the decisive step forward. "My mother's objections hold no sway over us," David assured me. "I'm the one who desires this marriage. Let's remain patient. She'll come around eventually." Thus, David and I became husband and wife, yet his mother remained steadfast in her refusal to acknowledge our union. "I'll never accept this. I refuse to attend any ceremony," she declared adamantly, escalating the tension further. In light of her unwavering stance, we postponed the wedding ceremony, clinging to the hope of winning her acceptance before celebrating our love publicly. Day after day, his father endeavored to sway her opinion, while David and I persisted in our appeals, pouring our hearts into each plea. Despite our efforts, her resolve remained unyielding. In a bid to soften her stance, my parents also visited his family numerous times, joining the chorus of voices imploring her to reconsider. Even some of David's relatives weighed in, urging her to embrace our union. Finally, after an onslaught of earnest appeals from all quarters, she relented. At long last, we could proceed with the wedding ceremony, our hearts brimming with gratitude for the collective efforts that led to this moment of acceptance. Despite lingering discontent, David and I pressed on with our wedding preparations and finally settled on a date, marking it a year from the day we officially registered our marriage, effectively our inaugural wedding anniversary. As the long-awaited day approached, a palpable sense of relief washed over us, culminating in the arrival of our wedding day itself. Filled with an overwhelming mix of emotions, I stood on the brink of tears, elated at the prospect of finally donning the wedding dress I had nearly abandoned. It felt surreal, like the culmination of a cherished dream. The ceremony unfolded seamlessly within the sacred confines of the church, setting the stage for a joyous reception. Surrounded by the warm embrace of well-wishers, I found myself enveloped in a cocoon of happiness. It was all thanks to David, whose unwavering support had guided me through moments of doubt and self-doubt, reminding me of my worthiness of love and marriage. Watching David, resplendent in his finery, exuding an aura of strength and reliability, filled my heart with an indescribable sense of contentment. Yet, as the festivities progressed and we prepared for a brief interlude, I caught sight of his mother ascending the stage, evidently seeking permission to address the gathering. And thus she embarked on her own discourse. "Thank you all for joining us in celebrating my son's wedding today," began the mother-in-law, her words slicing through the air like a chilling wind. "The truth is, the bride is unable to conceive, and I've harbored reservations about their union from the start." Her words struck me like a thunderbolt, freezing me in place as I contemplated the audacity of her disclosure on this joyous occasion. The once lively atmosphere in the venue dissolved into a stifling silence. However, she continued, undeterred, "My son was adamant, and so I reluctantly acquiesced to their marriage." In the midst of the hushed hall, her voice resonated with a chilling finality. Despite David's attempts to intervene, his mother clung to the microphone, forging ahead with her tirade. "You see, I may never have the joy of holding a grandchild in my arms. Can you fathom such a sorrowful predicament? Truly, I fail to comprehend his choice in a partner like this." Stunned by her relentless onslaught of cruelty, I struggled to find my voice as David grappled with his own emotions beside me. Then, with a callous laugh, she delivered the final blow. "Yes, as you can plainly see, my daughter-in-law is barren, but she's successful in her career, so I reluctantly consented to their union. Ha ha ha." Her laughter reverberated through the hall, a bitter echo of her disdain. As her gaze bore into me, she delivered one last venomous barb. "You ought to be grateful. This day owes its existence to me." With a smug satisfaction evident on her face, the mother-in-law resumed her seat. Her disgraceful speech concluded. Had there ever been a more offensive display? Stunned into silence, I scarcely registered the murmurs swirling around me. Urged by David and the venue staff, I was guided out of the hall, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and indignation. Once inside the dressing room, the floodgates of suppressed emotions burst open. Anger, sorrow, a profound sense of disappointment at the desecration of our long-awaited ceremony. Each emotion crashed over me in relentless waves, threatening to engulf me entirely. I never want to lay eyes on that woman again. I refuse to share a space with someone so callous, I declared, my voice trembling with raw emotion as I shed the wedding attire, opting instead for the comfort of my own clothes. "This is enough. I'm going home," I announced to David, my resolve unyielding as I stormed out of the dressing room, my footsteps echoing with determination. "Catherine, please, just wait." David's pleas fell on deaf ears as I hastily hailed a waiting taxi at the venue's entrance. "Take me home," I instructed the driver, my voice laced with a fervent urgency. Humiliated and incensed by my mother-in-law's public humiliation, all I desired was to escape from the scene of the ordeal as swiftly as possible. Our new home, just a brief 5-minute drive from the wedding venue, provided a sanctuary amidst the storm of emotions that engulfed me. Stepping across the threshold, the floodgates I had desperately held shut burst open, tears streaming down my cheeks unchecked. Never had I imagined I would endure such cruelty on what should have been the happiest day of my life. The joy of yesterday had swiftly transformed into the bitterest despair, leaving me reeling in disbelief. It wasn't a choice to bear my infertility, let alone to have it laid bare before a crowd of onlookers, especially on such a sacred occasion. As I struggled to compose myself, David entered. "Catherine, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me. I never anticipated my mother's hurtful words. I'm sorry I couldn't shield you from her cruelty." David's voice was laden with remorse as he bowed deeply before me, seeking my forgiveness. He explained that as the groom, he felt powerless to confront his mother's deplorable behavior. Aware of David's inherent decency, I harbored no ill will toward him. It was his mother who bore the blame for this affront, not him. "Please, Catherine, let's return to the wedding. I've asked my father to keep my mother away from the venue. They're occupied with the guests during the dress change, and we still have time to salvage the reception." "I refuse to let this day end in ruin," David implored, his earnest plea reaching me through the haze of my turmoil. I nodded in acquiescence, choosing to place my trust in David's assurances. I couldn't bear to inflict further pain upon him, my staunch supporter and understanding companion. Moreover, the thought of tarnishing the reception we had meticulously planned together weighed heavily on my conscience. Offering David my apology for hastily retreating, we embarked on the journey back to the venue. In the taxi, our hands intertwined, a silent vow passing between us to weather this storm and see our wedding reception through to its rightful conclusion. Upon our return to the family waiting room, we found my mother-in-law surrounded by relatives, her exhaustion palpable as she bore the weight of their collective reproach. Catching sight of my presence, she approached me with an air of contrition. "Oh, Catherine, I'm terribly sorry. Can we simply pretend that dreadful incident never occurred?" Her voice took on a pleading tone, her head bowed slightly in a gesture of supplication. It was a stark departure from the smug countenance she had worn at the reception. "What? How can you even suggest such a thing after the humiliation you inflicted in front of everyone? How can you expect us to simply forget?" My anger flared and me with her audacity, her attempt at reconciliation ringing hollow in my ears. The notion of forgiveness felt like an insult after the disgrace she had wrought. Why seek forgiveness now when you never truly accepted me to begin with? If you were so opposed, why not simply let things be? I voiced my refusal to acquiesce to her plea, my resolve unyielding as I prepared to return to the ceremony. "Don't be like that. I'm apologizing, so why won't you forgive me?" My mother-in-law's words hung in the air, laced with frustration and confusion. "I had no idea that one of your relatives was a key client of our company. It turns out, my maternal uncle oversees a significant client of my father-in-law's company. While I was away, he gave mother-in-law quite the dressing down. He even hinted at severing the business transaction. Thanks to my father-in-law's desperate apologies, the situation was barely kept under control. In that moment, clarity dawned upon me like a sudden revelation. Mother-in-law's apology wasn't born of genuine remorse but rather self-preservation. I was rendered speechless by the realization of her motives. It was then that David, who had observed our exchange in silence, finally interjected. "Mom, is that your idea of an apology? Aren't you disrespecting Catherine too much? And you're apologizing to her simply because you were reprimanded by a client?" David's voice, usually calm and composed, rang out with an uncharacteristic edge of frustration. My mother-in-law, taken aback by his sudden outburst, stared blankly in response. "Do you comprehend the magnitude of the pain you've caused Catherine, Mom?" David's voice rang out, filled with a raw intensity that echoed through the room. "You exposed her most sensitive issue in front of everyone at our wedding. As a human being, that's the lowest of lows, regardless of the circumstances. It's inexcusable. You casually brought up someone's health struggles like it was nothing." David's words surged forth, an unrelenting torrent of pent-up emotions directed squarely at his mother. He spared no detail, laying bare the hurt she had inflicted upon me, time and time again, wielding my infertility as a weapon. Today's egregious display at the reception had been the final straw. David's gaze bore into his mother with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. "I'm through with you. Consider yourself disowned if you can't accept Catherine as my wife. That's your issue to grapple with. Your words hold no sway over us. Our family's affairs are no concern of outsiders." With unwavering resolve, David severed ties with his mother in a single, decisive proclamation. There was no ambiguity in his declaration. He wanted no part in her life from this moment forward. As far as he was concerned, she was no longer his mother. "David, please, don't say such things. I want to celebrate with you. Let's not dwell on anger, all right? I won't utter another word. Let's try to salvage the mood and enjoy the rest of the wedding together, shall we?" His mother's complexion paled at David's words, her attempts to gauge his reaction met with futility. Despite her frantic efforts to placate him, it was evident that nothing she could say would sway David's resolve. "Today isn't just about me, it's about Catherine too. We're a team. We're inseparable. Disrespecting Catherine is akin to disrespecting me. I understand that you have no desire to celebrate our union, so I suggest you leave now." David's tone was unwavering, his words cutting through the air with an icy precision. Her apologies rang hollow. Mere attempts at self-preservation devoid of any genuine remorse towards me. David, with a merciless resolve, ordered her to depart, asserting that I was his sole family. "I can't believe this, David," his mother murmured in disbelief, her expression a mixture of shock and bewilderment. Clearly caught off guard by her son's unequivocal rejection, she found herself standing alone, alienated by David, me, David's father, and the rest of the relatives. With no allies left and facing the harsh reality of her situation, she reluctantly conceded defeat, her only recourse being to retreat from the scene. Once she had departed, I swiftly changed into a fresh dress, taking David's hand as we made our way back to the venue, united in our resolve. Though they remained unaware of the turmoil that had transpired, the guests greeted our return with a warm round of applause. It was evident that they had sensed the gravity of the situation and graciously awaited our return. I was deeply moved by their understanding and grateful for the comforting embrace of their warm reception. With my mother-in-law absent, the wedding reception flowed seamlessly. As David and I prepared to deliver our closing remarks, we took a moment to extend a heartfelt apology for the disruption caused earlier. With that, we successfully wrapped up the festivities without further interruption. True to David's resolve, we made the decision to cut all ties with my mother-in-law. David changed his contact details, ensuring no further communication could reach us. He even suggested we relocate, despite our recent settlement into our new home. Recognizing David's unwavering determination, I agreed to the move. The relocation expenses were graciously covered by my father-in-law, citing the troubles caused by my mother-in-law. With his support, we swiftly made the transition to our new residence. Once our move was finalized, my father-in-law took decisive action and served my mother-in-law with divorce papers. He too had grown weary of her mistreatment towards me, and the incident at the wedding was the final straw. Although a sincere apology managed to salvage our relationship with our uncle, who also happened to be a business associate, he had reached his limit with my mother-in-law's behavior. Consequently, she was expelled from the family home, left to forge a solitary path forward. Since David and I cut ties with my mother-in-law, we've been left in the dark about her whereabouts and well-being. From what we've heard through whispers and hearsay, it seems her disgraceful behavior at the wedding left her with no familial support. She's said to be enduring a solitary and difficult existence, scraping by in a modest apartment and working multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk just to make ends meet. Meanwhile, David and I are relishing in the tranquility of our married life. Though we hadn't been blessed with children, we find solace and contentment in our companionship. We're confident that as long as we continue to cherish and support each other, our bond will only grow stronger with each passing day. With this unwavering belief, we face our future hand in hand, filled with hope and anticipation for the life we're building together.
My name is Camila. I was a fresh college graduate, my life brimming with possibilities and dreams, when a single phone call snuffed out my joy like a gust of wind extinguishing a candle. It was a call that brought the news of my parents' tragic death in a car accident. The two people who had been my pillars of strength, my guiding lights, were suddenly gone. The shock of it was like a punch to the gut. I was a grown woman, yes, but I was just starting to navigate the adult world. My parents had been my safety net, my guides. Their sudden absence left me feeling like a ship adrift in a stormy sea. My father, with his hearty laughter and endless wisdom, was my hero. He was a man of strength and kindness, always ready with a word of advice or a comforting hug. I remember our long walks in the park, our deep conversations about everything from philosophy to the latest football game. He was my rock, my safe harbor in the stormy sea of life. My mother, with her gentle nature and unwavering support, was my best friend. She was the one who held my hand during scary movies, who stayed up late helping me with school projects, who was always there with a comforting word and a warm hug. Her love was a constant, soothing presence in my life. Their absence left a gaping hole in my life, a void that seemed impossible to fill. The house felt too quiet, too empty without their laughter and love filling it. Every corner was a reminder of them, every object a memory. In the midst of my grief, a man named Richard appeared. He was a worker at a trading company who happened to be at the scene of the accident. He had provided a witness statement, and he felt compelled to reach out to me, to offer his support. "Camila," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "I can't express how sorry I am for your loss. I saw what happened. It's not fair, and it's not right. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." His words, though simple, were a lifeline in the storm of my grief. Richard became a steady presence in my life, helping me navigate the legalities of the accident, the insurance claims, the mountain of paperwork that seemed to multiply every day. His support was invaluable, his kindness a balm for my aching heart. As the weeks turned into months, Richard and I grew closer. Our conversations grew longer, our silences more comfortable. One day, he took a deep breath, looked me in the eye, and said, "Camila, I've come to care about you a lot. More than I've cared about anyone else. Would you consider marrying me?" I was taken aback, but I looked into his eyes and saw the sincerity there. I thought about the comfort he had provided, the strength he had shown. And I said yes. I said yes to a new beginning, yes to a new chapter in my life. The wedding was a blur of joy and laughter, a day filled with hope and promise. After the celebrations, Richard and I moved into his house that was as grand as it was cold. The house was a testament to Richard's success, a symbol of the wealth he had amassed in his trading business. I was awestruck by its grandeur, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that crept over me each time I stepped into its marble halls. Soon after the move, I discovered I was pregnant. The news filled me with a sense of joy and anticipation. I dreamed of our child, of the life we would provide for him. Richard seemed pleased as well, but there was a hardness in his eyes that I couldn't quite understand. Our son, Max, was born on a clear winter morning. He was a beautiful baby, with Richard's dark hair and my bright blue eyes. Holding him in my arms, I felt a love so profound, so overwhelming, it took my breath away. Richard, too, seemed smitten with our son. But as the weeks turned into months, I noticed a change in him. One day, Richard came home late from work, his face set in a grim line. "Camila," he said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, "we need to talk about our expenses." I was taken aback. "What about them?" I asked, feeling a knot of worry form in my stomach. He threw a stack of bills on the table, his expression stern. "They've gone up, Camila," he said, his voice cold. "Ever since Max was born, we're spending much more than we used to." I felt my heart sink. "But Richard," I said, "we have a baby now. Babies need things." He shot me a hard look. "That's not the point, Camila," he said. "You're spending too much. On things we don't need." I was stunned. "I'm spending on our son, Richard," I said, my voice rising in defense. "On his needs." His face hardened. "I'm the one who's earning, Camila," he said, his voice harsh. "I'm the one who's supporting this family. You should be more grateful." His words hit me like a punch in the gut. I felt a mixture of anger and hurt well up inside me. I had thought Richard was my partner, my ally. But his words made it clear that he saw me as a liability, an additional expense that he had to bear. The days following our heated exchange were filled with tension. Richard became more stringent about our budget, scrutinizing every receipt, every purchase. He was relentless in his accusations of my alleged overspending, despite my best efforts to economize. "Camila," he'd say, his voice dripping with condescension, "you need to understand the value of money." "Richard, we need food," I'd say. "And Max needs diapers. We can't just stop buying them." He'd look at me, his eyes hard and cold. "Then figure it out, Camila. Make do with less." I'd bite my tongue, holding back the retort that was on the tip of it. It wasn't that I didn't understand the value of money, it was that Richard seemed to value it more than he did his own family. Food shopping became a game of strategy. I'd scour the aisles for the cheapest products, calculate the cost per meal, per person. I'd choose the store brands over the name brands, the bruised apples over the pristine ones. I'd walk miles to the store and back, foregoing the cost of public transport to save a few dollars. Richard's decree extended to clothing as well. No new clothes, he'd said, his voice firm, unyielding. Make do with what you have. I looked at my worn-out wardrobe, the frayed edges of my dresses, the faded colors of my shirts. I felt a pang of sadness. I wasn't asking for designer clothes or expensive jewelry. Just something new, something that hadn't been worn to threads. One day, I saw a beautiful little jumper for Max in a store window. It was on sale, but even then, it was more than I could afford. I walked away, my heart heavy. When I got home, Richard was there. You were at the store, weren't you? Buying more stuff we don't need. I didn't buy anything, Richard, I said, my voice steady. I can't. You've made sure of that. He scoffed. Don't play the victim, Camila. You're the one who can't control her spending. I looked at him, my heart pounding. I'm trying to provide for our son, Richard. Can't you see that? He got up, his face red. I'm the one providing for this family, Camila. You're just spending my money. I felt a surge of anger. Your money? Richard, we're a family. It's our money. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Oh, Camila. You're so naive. I stood my ground, my hands clenched. No, Richard. I'm not naive. I'm just trying to do what's best for our son. He glared at me. And I'm trying to save us from bankruptcy. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? With that, he stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart aching. All the while, I noticed Richard's lifestyle remained unchanged. He still wore his designer suits, still splurged on expensive gadgets. He'd come home with a new phone, a new laptop, a new watch, while I was left to mend old clothes and ration our meals. Richard, I'd say, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice, how come you get to buy new things, but I can't? He'd look at me, a smug smile on his face. Because I earn the money, Camila. I get to decide how it's spent. His words stung, a slap in the face. I was his wife, the mother of his child, but he treated me like a burden, like an unwanted expense. His greed was clear, his arrogance palpable. He valued his gadgets more than he valued us. It was a Tuesday when Max came down with a fever. His little body was hot to the touch, his eyes were red from crying. I knew I had to get him medicine, and quick. I rummaged through the cupboards, my heart sinking when I saw them bare. We were out of money, out of options. I did the only thing I could. I took the last of our cash, the money I'd been saving for Richard's favorite steak, and bought medicine for Max. I knew Richard would be mad, knew he'd be furious. But Max was more important. He was my son, my baby. I couldn't let him suffer. When Richard came home that night, he was in a foul mood. He'd had a long day at work, he said, and all he wanted was a good meal. When he saw the empty table, his face turned red. Camila, he said, his voice low and dangerous, where's my dinner? I swallowed hard. Max was sick, I said. I used the money to buy him medicine. Richard's eyes narrowed. You what? I bought medicine for Max, I repeated, my voice steady despite the fear in my heart. Richard slammed his fist on the table. You spent my money on medicine for that brat? I flinched at his words. Max is our son, Richard. He was sick. Richard scoffed. He's always sick. Always needing something. Just like you. I felt a surge of anger. We're your family, Richard. We're not freeloaders. Richard stood up, his face contorted with rage. You're nothing but a burden, Camila. You and that kid. All you do is take. I stood my ground. We're your responsibility, Richard. You can't just abandon us. Richard laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. Watch me. And with that, He grabbed my arm, yanked me to the door. "Get out," he said, his voice cold. "Take your brat and get out." I looked at him, my heart pounding. "Richard, please. He's sick. We have nowhere to go." Richard's gaze was icy. "Not my problem." He shoved us out the door, slamming it shut behind us. 5 minutes later, he threw a bag of our clothes at my feet. I stood there, holding Max in my arms, the cold seeping into my bones. I looked at the house, our house, now a fortress we were barred from. That was the final straw. I knew then that I couldn't stay with Richard, couldn't subject Max to his cruelty. We deserved better, deserved a life free of his anger, his greed. So, I walked away, Max clutched in my arms, our future uncertain. But I knew one thing for sure. I would fight for us, fight for a better life. Richard had pushed us away, but he couldn't break us. We were stronger than he thought, stronger than he'd ever know. The city was vast and overwhelming, a concrete jungle where I knew no one. My son, Max, was just a toddler, too young to understand the dire situation we were in. With no money, no friends, and no home, I felt like a ship adrift in a stormy sea. That's when I remembered Grandma. My father's mother, a woman I had seen only once in my life, came to mind. Dad had a strained relationship with her and they had lost contact many years ago. I barely remembered her face, but I remembered the house she lived in, a large, old structure nestled in a quiet town far from the city's bustle. I had no choice but to take a leap of faith. With the last of my money, found in the pocket of my old jacket, I bought 2 intercity bus tickets. Max and I boarded the bus, our future uncertain but our resolve firm. The journey was long, and Max, feeling unwell, whimpered in my arms. I held him close, whispering soothing words, promising a better future. We arrived at Grandma's town as the sun was setting. The large, old house stood just as I remembered, a beacon of hope amidst our turmoil. Gathering my courage, I walked up to the door and knocked. The door creaked open, and there stood Grandma. She was older than I remembered, her face stern and her eyes sharp. She looked at me, a hint of confusion in her eyes. "Yes?" she asked, her voice firm. I swallowed my fear and introduced myself. "Grandma, it's me, Camila. I'm your son's daughter." She squinted at me, studying my face. After a moment, recognition dawned on her. "You have your father's eyes," she said, her voice softer. She opened the door wider, inviting us in. We stepped into the house, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold outside. I told Grandma everything about Richard, about Max's illness, about our eviction. I poured out my fears and worries, the burdens I had been carrying alone for so long. Grandma listened, her face hardening as I mentioned Richard. "That scoundrel," she spat, her eyes flashing with anger. "He'll get what he deserves." In that moment, I felt a surge of relief. Here was someone who believed in me, someone who was on my side. Grandma offered us a place to stay, a place to call home. We were no longer alone, we had Grandma. That night, as Max slept soundly in a warm bed and I sat by the fire with Grandma, I felt a glimmer of hope. The journey to Grandma's was fraught with uncertainty and fear, but it led us to a safe haven. It was our first step towards a new life, a life away from Richard's shadow. The attic was a dusty, forgotten place, filled with boxes upon boxes of old stuff. Grandma hadn't been up there in years, and it showed. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and mothballs, and the floor creaked under my weight. "Be careful, Camila," Grandma called from the bottom of the stairs. "It's been ages since anyone's been up there." I nodded, my eyes scanning the room. As a person trained as a restorer, I could see the potential in the discarded items. There were old furniture pieces, paintings, knickknacks, all covered in a thick layer of dust. It was like stepping into a time capsule, a glimpse into the past. With Grandma's permission, I started working on the items. I cleaned, repaired, and restored them, bringing them back to life. Each piece had a story to tell, a history to uncover. It was a labor of love, a way to keep my mind off the troubles of the past. Days turned into weeks, and before I knew it, the attic was transformed. The old, discarded items were now beautiful antiques, their value increased tenfold. I took some of them to a local antique store, hoping to make a small profit. The owner, a man named Mr. Peterson, was surprised by the quality of the items. "These are fantastic, Camila," he said, his eyes wide. "Where did you find them?" "In my grandma's attic," I replied, a smile playing on my lips. She had no idea what she was sitting on. Mr. Peterson laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Well, she's a lucky woman to have a granddaughter like you." I blushed, thanking him for his kind words. He bought all the items, giving me a hefty sum of money. I was stunned. I had hoped for a small profit, but this was beyond my wildest dreams. When I returned home, Grandma was waiting for me. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes hopeful. I showed her the money, her eyes widening in surprise. "Oh my, Camila," she said, her voice shaky. "I can't believe it." I shrugged, trying to hide my excitement. "It's all thanks to you, Grandma. These are your treasures, after all." We celebrated that night, a small victory in our battle for a better life. The attic treasures were more than just old items. They were a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always a glimmer of hope. From then on, I continued to restore the items in the attic. Each piece brought us closer to our goal, each sale a step towards our new life. The attic treasures were our lifeline, our saving grace. And we were grateful for them, for the hope they brought us, for the future they promised. Richard, that good-for-nothing, hadn't bothered to check on us. Not even a call to ask about his son. I guess he was too busy with his new life, too busy to care about the family he left behind. But we weren't going to let him off the hook that easily. Grandma had a friend, a lawyer named Stan. He was a tough old bird, sharp as a tack, and he didn't take any nonsense. "We'll get that bastard," he promised, his eyes hard. "He won't get away with this." With Stan's help, we filed a claim for child support. Richard was furious when he found out. He called me, his voice a venomous hiss. "You'll regret this, Camila," he threatened. "You don't know what you're getting into." But I wasn't scared. Not anymore. "Bring it on, Richard," I shot back. "We'll see who regrets it in the end." The day of the court hearing arrived. Richard strutted in, all puffed up like a peacock, his lawyer by his side. He sneered at me, his eyes cold and hard. But I didn't flinch. I was ready for him. Stan presented our case, his voice steady and firm. He talked about Max, about how Richard had abandoned us, about how he hadn't paid a dime for his son's upkeep. The judge listened, his face impassive. Then it was Richard's turn. His lawyer was smooth, his words slick. He painted Richard as the victim, as a man wronged by his vindictive ex-wife. But we had a trump card. I played a recording of Richard's tirade the night he kicked us out. He didn't know about it, and I decided to surprise him. His threats, his cruel words, all for the court to hear. The room fell silent as his voice filled the air, his true nature exposed for all to see. Richard's face turned pale, his confident facade crumbling. The judge frowned, his eyes hard. "This court will not tolerate such behavior," he said, his voice stern. "Mr. Jackson, you will pay child support as required by law. You also have to pay for the emotional abuse of your ex-wife and son." Richard was stunned. He looked at me, his eyes full of disbelief. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The look on his face was victory enough. After the court hearing, Richard tried to worm his way back into our lives. He called me, his voice all sweet and smooth, like honey dripping from a spoon. "Camila," he said, "let's start over. For Max's sake." I laughed, a bitter, cynical laugh. "Start over? With you?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No, Richard. We're done." I could hear the surprise in his voice. "But Camila," he stammered, "you need me. You can't survive without my money." That's where he was wrong. I had a job now, a good job. I was a restorer, working for a local antique store and a museum. I was making good money, enough to support Max and me. And with Grandma's help, we were doing just fine. "I don't need you, Richard," I said, my voice steady. "I've got a job. A good job. And Max and I are doing just fine." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Richard laughed, a harsh, bitter laugh. "You? Working? I don't believe it." "Well, you better start believing it," I shot back. "Because it's true. And guess what, Richard? I'm not just surviving. I'm thriving." There was more silence. Then Richard hung up, his parting words a venomous hiss. "You'll regret this, Camila. You'll see." But I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I had found my strength, my independence. And there was no going back. The next few months were a whirlwind. I was busy with work, with Max, with life. But I was happy. Truly, genuinely happy. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from Richard, free from fear, free from uncertainty. Grandma was proud of me. "You did good, kid," she said one day, her eyes twinkling. "You stood up for yourself. You took control of your life." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "Thanks, Grandma," I said. "I couldn't have done it without you." And that was the truth. Grandma had been my rock, my support. She had stood by me, had helped me find my strength. And for that, I was grateful. The sweet taste of victory was more than just a court win. It was a personal victory, a testament to my strength, my resilience. It was a reminder that I was more than just Richard's ex-wife. I was a survivor, a fighter, a mother, a restorer. And as I looked at Max, his eyes bright with laughter, his face full of joy, I knew I had made the right choice. I had chosen to fight, to stand up for myself, for my son. And I had won.
Life was mostly predictable for me, Sarah, a 30-year-old fiercely climbing the corporate ladder. From my college days to the boardroom meetings, I had it all planned out. But the plot twist in my well-structured life script? Marrying Alex and forming an unexpected alliance with his mother, Linda. Alex and I met in the least romantic of places, the university library. I was buried in finance books, he was wrestling with computer science. Our eyes met over a pile of textbooks, and the rest, as they say, is history. We were two college kids, juggling classes and dreams, but together, we were invincible. Alex was the calm to my storm, the laughter to my seriousness. Our friend Brian, a pal from college days, played a big part in our lives too. He was the one who vouched for Alex, getting him a job as an IT guy at his firm. Brian and his wife, Rachel, were like the couple version of that cozy, familiar cafe you love, always welcoming, always a good time. Then came Linda, Alex's mom. I'd heard the horror stories, the meddling, the judging. But Linda? She was different. Warmth radiated from her like the sun on a chilly morning. She welcomed me not just into her family but into her heart. "Sarah, you're exactly what Alex needs. A strong, smart woman. He's a lucky man," Linda would say, her eyes twinkling with sincerity. And somehow, her words made me feel not just accepted, but cherished. Our relationship was a dance of mutual respect and affection. Even on my busiest days, I'd make time to call her, just to check in. Hey, Linda, it's Sarah. How are you holding up? Oh, dear, just the usual. But tell me, how's work? Don't let them overwork you, Linda would reply, her voice always laced with concern. We'd chat about everything and nothing, from her legendary apple pie recipe to the latest office politics. Linda wasn't just my mother-in-law, she was a confidant, a friend. We were a trio bound by love, but even the strongest bonds can fray under the weight of unspoken truths and unmet expectations. And as the days rolled into nights, the cracks began to widen, setting the stage for a storm that was silently brewing on the horizon. The glow of my career cast a shadow over my personal life. With each promotion and business trip, the distance between Alex and me grew. Our home, once a sanctuary, started to feel more like a hotel for me, a place to crash between flights. One evening, I returned from a grueling 2-week trip. The house greeted me with a cold silence and a mess that seemed to scream neglect. Pizza boxes piled up like a monument to Alex's apathy, and the laundry basket overflowed, a testament to the widening gap in our relationship. Alex, this is ridiculous. It looks like a dump here. I snapped, my frustration boiling over as I surveyed the chaos. He looked up from his computer, his eyes barely registering my presence. Hey, Sarah. Chill. Yeah, it's just a bit of mess. No big deal. No big deal? I work my butt off, and you can't even manage to keep the house clean? Is that asking too much? My voice was sharp, the words slicing through the tense air. He shrugged, a dismissive gesture that fueled my anger. You know I'm not Mr. Clean. Why fuss about it? Why? Because I live here too, Alex. Because we're supposed to be a team. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. The conversation, if you could call it that, ended with cold silence. Our home felt more like a battleground, our conversations reduced to terse exchanges and resentful glances. The next day, Linda called. Her voice, usually so warm and comforting, carried a note of concern that made my heart sink. Sarah, dear, is everything all right? You sounded off yesterday. I sighed, the weight of the unspoken truths heavy on my chest. It's been tough, Linda. The house, Alex, everything seems to be falling apart. Linda was silent for a moment, then spoke with a firmness that was rare for her. Sarah, you're doing your best. But Alex needs to step up. You can't carry the load alone. Her words were a balm, a reminder that I wasn't in this turmoil alone. But they were also a stark reminder of the growing rift between Alex and me. That night, as I lay in bed, the moonlight casting a soft glow in the room, I couldn't shake the feeling of disquiet. The once comforting silence now felt oppressive, filled with the echoes of our failing relationship. Alex, we need to talk. This can't go on, I whispered into the darkness. He turned to face me, his face a mask of indifference. What's there to talk about, Sarah? It's just a bit of mess, not the end of the world. But it's not just the mess, Alex. It's us. We're drifting apart, and if we don't do something, I'm afraid we'll end up strangers living under the same roof. He didn't respond, the silence between us growing louder than any words could. In that moment, I realized that the cracks weren't just beginning to show, they were widening, threatening to split the very foundation of our marriage. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were supposed to be filled with the warmth of family and the joy of togetherness. However, life had other plans. Linda was hospitalized due to an exacerbation of her chronic illness. The hospital's sterile, impersonal halls were a stark contrast to the festive atmosphere we had hoped for. Sitting by her hospital bed, I held her hand, her usual warmth diminished by the cold touch of 4 needles. Linda, you won't spend Thanksgiving here. I'll pick you up and we'll celebrate at home, just like we always do, I assured her, squeezing her hand gently. She smiled weakly, a shadow of her usual vibrant self. Thank you, dear. But what about your work? You're always so busy. she murmured, concern for me outweighing her own discomfort. Don't worry about that, Linda. You're more important, I replied, though the weight of my responsibilities loomed large in my mind. However, just as I was ready to put work aside for family, my boss dropped a bombshell. He called me into his office, his expression grim. Sarah, we need you on an urgent business trip. It's critical, and I wouldn't ask if it weren't absolutely necessary. I felt torn, caught between my commitment to my family and my duties at work. But sir, it's Thanksgiving, and my mother-in-law is in the hospital. I promised her I'd be there, I explained, hoping for some understanding. He sighed, his gaze fixed on some unseen dill. Sarah. I understand your predicament, Sarah, but this is a matter of great importance. We're counting on you. The weight of my professional life was a burden I was accustomed to carrying, but it had never before felt so heavy. With a heavy heart, I turned to the one person I thought I could rely on. Alex, I have to go on this trip. It's urgent. Can you please make sure your mom is taken care of? Pick her up from the hospital on Thanksgiving Day. She shouldn't be alone on the holiday, I pleaded, the worry evident in my voice. Alex, who had been more distant lately, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He nodded, a glimmer of the man I once knew shining through. Of course, Sarah. I'll take care of Mom. You don't have to worry about a thing, he assured me, his voice steady and reassuring. Reluctantly, I packed my bags, my mind a chaotic mix of client meetings and concern for Linda. As I left, I glanced back at our home, a place that once represented comfort and love, now a symbol of the sacrifices and choices that define our lives. On the trip, amidst the endless meetings and business strategies, my thoughts constantly drifted back to Linda and Alex. I found myself checking my phone incessantly, hoping for an update, a sign that everything was as it should be. But it was the silence that spoke volumes, the absence of messages or calls that painted a picture far from the reassuring promises made. As the critical hours ticked away, the unease in my heart grew, a foreboding sense that this Thanksgiving was going to be unlike any other we had ever experienced. The silence of my phone was deafening, each missed call to Alex a growing echo of my anxiety. The business trip, usually a whirlwind of meetings and networking, felt like a slow crawl, each moment stretching out with worry for Linda and frustration towards Alex. I tried calling again, the phone ringing hopelessly into the void. Come on, Alex, pick up. I muttered under my breath, the bustling airport around me fading into a blur. The call went to voicemail, again. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios, each more troubling than the last. In desperation, I dialed Linda's number, half expecting the same cold silence. But after a few rings, her frail voice came through, weak and tinged with sadness. Linda, it's Sarah. I've been trying to reach Alex. How are you? Is everything set for Thanksgiving? My words tumbled out, a mix of hope and dread. Oh, Sarah. Linda's voice broke, a soft sob cutting through. I'm still at the hospital. Alex, he didn't come. My heart sank, a heavy weight of betrayal and worry settling in. What? But he promised. He said he'd be there for you. The words felt hollow, a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions inside me. I know, dear. I waited, but Linda's voice trailed off, the hurt unmistakable. Anger and concern battled within me. How could Alex do this? How could he leave his own mother alone in the hospital, especially on Thanksgiving? I knew I had to act, and fast. Linda, I'm so sorry. I'm coming back right now. I'll sort this out, I promise. With a shaky hand, I dialed my boss, the urgency in my voice cutting through the formalities. Sir, I need to go back. It's an emergency. My family needs me. I'm sorry, but I can't stay. To my relief, he understood. Go, Sarah. Family is important. We'll manage here. The relief was short-lived, replaced by a sense of urgency. I rushed through the airport, each step fueled by a mix of worry for Linda and a growing anger towards Alex. As the plane took off, my mind raced with unanswered questions. Why didn't Alex pick up Linda? Where was he? And most importantly, what would I find when I got back? The flight felt like an eternity, each mile home a mix of dread and determination. I was going back, not just to salvage the remains of Thanksgiving, but to confront the unsettling truths that lay hidden behind Alex's unanswered calls. After the draining flight and the tense drive, the world seemed to slow down as Linda and I approached her house. I managed to pick her up from the hospital. The night was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, loaded with unspoken truths waiting to burst forth. I glanced at Linda, her face etched with the pain of her son's betrayal. Her silent tears were a sharp reminder of the reality we were about to face. I reached for her hand, offering a silent promise of support, no matter what lay behind the closed door of her home. Pulling into the driveway, I hesitated for a moment before picking up my phone. It was time to confront Alex, to demand the truth that had been so carelessly twisted. I dialed his number, my heart pounding against my chest. After a few rings, Alex's voice came through, casual, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "Hey, Sarah. What's up? Alex, where are you? And where's your mom?" My voice was steady, each word a carefully laid trap. There was a brief pause, and then, "Oh, Mom's right here. We're at her place, getting things ready for Thanksgiving, just like we planned." The lie was so blatant, so hurtful, that for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Linda, sitting beside me, let out a soft whimper, her heartbreak audible in the cramped space of the car. I ended the call and turned to Linda, her face a portrait of a mother's heart shattered by her own son's lies. "We're going to get to the bottom of this," I assured her, though my voice trembled with my own swirling emotions. Linda nodded, a silent warrior bracing for the battle ahead. We got out of the car and walked up to the front door. The familiarity of the place, once a symbol of family gatherings and joyous celebrations, now felt tainted, corrupted by the web of lies spun within its walls. Linda, with a hand that trembled ever so slightly, unlocked the door. We stepped inside, the dimly lit hallway leading us towards the faint sounds of conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the somber mood that clung to us like a second skin. As we moved quietly towards the living room, the reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. There, in a scene that seemed surreal in its normalcy, was Alex, sitting cozily next to Rachel, Brian's wife. The laughter, the intimacy of their posture, spoke volumes of the betrayal that had been hiding in plain sight. For a moment, time stood still. The air was thick with tension, the silence a stark prelude to the storm of emotions about to be unleashed. Linda's presence beside me was both a source of strength and a poignant reminder of the pain inflicted not just on a wife, but on a mother. The silence in the room was deafening, the air thick with the tension of a moment that none of us could have imagined. Alex and Rachel, caught in the act, looked like deer in headlights, their guilt written all over their faces. "What the hell is this, Alex?" My voice was a mix of rage and disbelief, my words cutting through the silence like a knife. Alex stuttered, his usual laid-back demeanor shattered by the gravity of the situation. "Sarah, it's not what it looks like. I can explain." "Explain? Explain how you could do this to your own mother? To me?" I shot back, the fury in my voice making my hands tremble. Linda stood silently, her eyes fixed on her son, the pain and betrayal in her gaze more piercing than any words could ever be. Rachel, her face pale and tear-streaked, finally found her voice. "Sarah, please, don't tell Brian. This was a mistake. A terrible mistake." "Mistake? You call this a mistake?" I couldn't contain the bitterness in my voice. "You both made choices, selfish, hurtful choices. And now, you want to sweep it all under the rug like it's nothing?" Alex tried to speak, to salvage what little he could from the wreckage of lies. "Sarah, please, let's talk about this. We can fix it." "Fix it? How, Alex?" "By pretending that your affair, your betrayal of everything we stood for never happened? The room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of the truth now laid bare. Linda, who had been a silent witness to the unfolding drama, finally spoke, her voice a soft yet formidable force. Alex, how could you? After everything, how could you do this to your family? Alex's gaze dropped, unable to meet the eyes of the two women he had hurt the most. The room was filled with the sound of broken hearts and shattered trust, the aftermath of choices that could never be undone. Rachel, her composure crumbling, pleaded through her tears. It was a mistake. I never meant to hurt anyone. Mistakes are forgetting to pick up milk, Rachel, not having an affair with your friend's husband. I snapped, the rawness of my emotions leaving no room for sympathy. The confrontation was a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and disbelief, a storm that left no one untouched. Each word spoken was like a piece of the life we had known, falling away to reveal the harsh reality beneath. In the wake of the turmoil, the world seemed to stand still, the rhythm of life disrupted by the discordant notes of betrayal and loss. Linda and I found ourselves adrift in a sea of uncertainty, clinging to the fragile raft of our shared pain. The living room, once a hub of laughter and warmth, now felt like an echo chamber of our shattered dreams. Linda and I sat, a silent understanding between us, the weight of recent revelations heavy in the air. Sarah, I just can't fathom it, how Alex could do this. And Brian, poor Brian. Linda's voice trailed off, the edges of her words frayed with sorrow and disbelief. I nodded, my heart heavy. I know, Linda. It's like we've been living in a parallel universe, and now we've been thrust back into a harsh reality. The silence that followed was laden with unspoken thoughts and fears. The future, once a canvas of shared dreams and plans, now loomed before us, daunting and undefined. Sarah, what are you going to do now? Linda's question, soft and tentative, broke the stillness. I sighed, the weight of decision heavy on my shoulders. I've been thinking about that a lot. Divorce seems like the only path forward. I can't. I won't stay tethered to a lie. Linda reached out, her hand a warm presence in the chill of our disillusionment. I support you, whatever you decide. You're strong, Sarah. Stronger than you know. Her words were a balm to my weary soul, a reminder that even in the darkest times, we are never truly alone. The days that followed were a blur of activity, a flurry of paperwork and decisions that seemed to strip the color from the world. The word divorce echoed in the empty spaces of our home, a stark reminder of all that had been lost. Alex's attempts at reconciliation fell on deaf ears. His presence, once a source of comfort and joy, was now a specter of betrayal, a ghost haunting the corridors of my heart. Sarah, please. Can we not try to work through this? I'm sorry, more sorry than you can imagine, Alex pleaded, his words a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm his actions had created. Sorry doesn't undo what you did, Alex. It doesn't erase the pain, the lies. I need to find my way forward, and I can't do that with you, I replied, my voice a steady anchor in the storm of my emotions. The revelation of Alex and Rachel's affair sent shockwaves through our lives, but the fallout didn't end there. Brian, who had been a friend and ally, was blindsided by the betrayal. His decision was swift and final. Alex lost not only his wife but his job as well, the consequences of his actions leaving him isolated and exposed. Rachel, too, faced the harsh aftermath as Brian filed for divorce, the trust in their marriage irreparably broken. The garden was serene, a tranquil oasis where Linda and I sat, surrounded by the vivid tapestry of autumn. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of change, a reminder that even in life's coldest moments, warmth and beauty could still be found. Linda broke the silence, her voice thoughtful. You know, Sarah, life never stops surprising us. Just when we think we have it all figured out, it turns everything upside down. I smiled, feeling the truth in her words. It sure does. But somehow, it's in these upside-down moments that we really find our strength, don't you think? She nodded, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of experiences lived and lessons learned. Absolutely. Strength and maybe a bit of stubbornness too. Our laughter mingled with the gentle rustle of leaves, a symphony of resilience and renewed spirit. The conversation drifted, touching on memories, dreams, and the open road ahead. I've been giving it a lot of thought. I began, the idea that had been simmering in my mind now ready to be shared. I think it's time for a new chapter, Linda. A new place, new faces, a new start. Linda's eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and understanding. A new place? That's a big step. But if anyone can make it work, it's you, Sarah. What's on your mind? Somewhere far from here. A place where the past doesn't linger around every corner. I want to rediscover myself, outside the shadows of what's happened, I said, the words painting a picture of hope and liberation. Linda reached for my hand, her touch a warm anchor in the sea of uncertainty. You'll always have a place here, Sarah. No distance can change that. And remember, I'm just a phone call away, day or night. I squeezed her hand, grateful beyond words. I know, Linda. And that means the world to me. But I feel like this is something I need to do. To prove to myself that I can start over, that I can build something new from the ground up. We all need that sometimes, a fresh start, Linda mused, her gaze following the flight of a lone bird across the sky. And while you're out there, building your new life, never forget how strong you are, Sarah. You've weathered a storm many couldn't, and you've come out stronger on the other side. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The garden, a riot of colors and life, stood as a testament to new beginnings and the resilience of nature. As the day faded into evening, the garden became a silhouette against the twilight sky. Linda and I sat in comfortable silence, two souls connected by shared experiences and an unbreakable bond. With Linda's support in my heart and the lessons of the past in my mind, I stepped into the new chapter, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The journey wasn't about forgetting or leaving behind, it was about moving forward, carrying the wisdom of experience as a beacon in the journey towards a new horizon.
I'm Emma, a 34-year-old photographer, recently turned full-time mom. My world, once framed through the lens of my camera, now revolved around the tiny bundle of joy sleeping in the next room. But beneath the surface of this newfound motherhood, something was amiss. The house, our once beloved sanctuary, felt like a hollow echo of its former self. The grandeur of the terrace, where Alex and I used to share dreams over morning coffees, now seemed to mock me with its emptiness. The garden, meticulously cared for, stood silent, a witness to the growing void between us. I still remember the day I came home from the hospital, our baby boy cradled in my arms. I expected warmth, tears of joy, something, anything. Instead, Alex greeted us with a glance that barely hid his indifference. "Honey, aren't you excited? Say hello to your son," I nudged, trying to mask the tremble in my voice. Alex barely glanced at our baby, his eyes void of the spark I used to know. "Yeah, he's great. I'm just not good with babies, you know? Give me time." It wasn't just the baby. The Alex I knew, the one I fell in love with, seemed to have vanished. Each day he'd return from work, his face a mask of fatigue, his words sparse and hollow. One evening, as I rocked our son to sleep, the silence became unbearable. "Alex, we need to talk. This distance between us, it's not just about the baby, is it?" He sighed, his attention fixed on some distant point beyond the walls of our once happy home. "Emma, don't start. I'm tired, work's a mess. I don't need another lecture." I felt a pang of anger, mixed with a dose of fear. "Lecture? Alex, look at us, at our family. You're a father now, and I feel like I'm doing this all alone." He finally looked at me, his eyes cold, distant. "What do you want from me, Emma? A parade? I'm here, I'm working, I'm providing. What more do you want?" The words stung, each one a reminder of the chasm that had formed between us. "I want you, Alex. The man I married. The man who promised to be by my side, not a shadow that haunts this house. He stood up, his frustration evident. I can't deal with this right now. I'm not the enemy, Emma. Maybe you're the one who changed. Life after bringing our son home wasn't the blissful picture I had painted in my mind. It was more like a puzzle, with pieces that didn't quite fit. Alex, the man I vowed to spend my life with, was the piece that had shifted the most. His late nights at work were becoming a pattern, a repeat of a past I thought we had buried deep. One chilly evening, as I cradled our son, trying to soothe his fussiness, the sound of the front door creaking open broke the monotony. Alex walked in, his face drawn, his eyes avoiding mine. Back late again, huh? I said, my voice laced with a tiredness that went beyond physical. Alex just grunted, tossing his keys on the table. Work's a mess. You wouldn't understand. The sharpness in his tone stung. Wouldn't understand? Alex, I've been there. Remember the late nights in the studio, the deadlines? I get it. But this is different. You're different. He scoffed, loosening his tie with a jerk. Different how? Because I'm trying to provide for this family? Because I'm not jumping with joy every minute? I bit back the retort that sprung to my lips, choosing my words carefully. It's not about providing, Alex. It's about being present. You barely look at your son, you barely talk to me. It's like you're here, but you're not. He looked at me then, his eyes hard. What do you want from me, Emma? I'm working my ass off every day, coming home to this. He gestured vaguely around the room. And all I get is complaints. The hurt was raw, real. Complaints? Is that what you think this is? Alex, I'm worried. About us, about you. I see how you avoid us, how you're pulling away. It reminds me of before. The air turned icy. Alex's face tightened, his jaw clenching. Before? You're bringing that up again? I thought we were past that, Emma. I thought we agreed to leave that behind. I held our son closer, his small warmth a stark contrast to the chill between us. Leave it behind? How can I, Alex, when you're acting just like you did back then? Late nights, the distance, the silence. It's all too familiar. He threw up his hands, frustration radiating off him. So, what, you think I'm cheating again? Is that it? You think I haven't changed? The question hung in the air, heavy and unwelcome. I don't know, Alex. I don't know what to think. All I know is that something's not right. And it's tearing us apart. He ran a hand through his hair, a telltale sign of his stress. Tearing us apart? Maybe it's your constant accusations, ever thought of that? Maybe it's you who's not letting us move forward. And just like that, he left the room, leaving behind a silence that was louder than any argument. It was just another mundane afternoon when my phone buzzed with a notification. A message from someone I didn't recognize. Curiosity piqued, I opened it, not knowing that those few lines were about to shatter the fragile piece of my world. Emma, you don't know me, but I think it's time you did. Alex has been living a double life, and I'm the other woman. My heart stopped. This had to be some sick joke. But then I saw the pictures attached. Alex, not just with this woman, but with children, 3 of them, each bearing a resemblance to the man I called my husband. I was still reeling from the shock when Alex walked in, earlier than usual. Back so soon? I managed to say, my voice a mere whisper. He shrugged, clearly oblivious to the storm raging inside me. Yeah, things were slow at the office. I held up my phone, the picture of him with that woman and the children filling the screen. Slow, huh? Is this how you kill time? His face went white, the mask of indifference crumbling in an instant. Emma, what? Where did you get this? The words felt heavy, each one a stone sinking in the pit of my stomach. From her, Alex. Your other woman. He tried to grab the phone, but I pulled away, my eyes never leaving his. So, it's true then? The late nights, the distance. It wasn't just work. It was them. Alex sank into a chair, his facade shattered. Emma, listen, it's not what you think. I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the silence. Not what I think. Alex, the pictures don't lie. You have a whole other family. How long? How long have you been lying to me? He buried his face in his hands, a defeated figure. A few years. It started small, I didn't mean for it to go this far. A few years. The words hung in the air, a testament to the lie my life had become. And the children, Alex? Are they yours? He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The truth was right there, in the silence, in the photos, in the years of deceit. You need to leave, Alex. Now, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. And with that, he left, the sound of the closing door marking the end of our story. I sat there, alone, holding our son, the only real thing in the mess that was my life. Just when the dust seemed to be settling, life decided to throw another curveball. I was in the middle of a feeding session with my son when the doorbell rang, slicing through the quiet of the afternoon. Expecting maybe a delivery or a neighbor, I was completely taken aback to see Alex, looking sheepish, and a woman I recognized from the photos, the other woman, standing boldly in my doorway. Before I could even react, she pushed past me into the house. Her eyes roamed around, taking in every detail of the home I had put my heart into. This is quite the place you've got here, Emma. Cozy and spacious. Perfect for a family, don't you think, Alex? She said, her voice dripping with a mix of mockery and entitlement. Alex didn't meet my gaze, his shame evident, but his voice silent. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure in the face of this intrusion. And what family would that be? Because the last time I checked, this was my home, I retorted, standing protectively in front of my son's crib. She smirked, a calculated glint in her eye. Well, the family Alex should have been with all along. Me and our 3 kids. You see, we need this house more than you do. A big, beautiful house for a big family. You understand, right? The audacity of her words struck a nerve. I was fuming, each word from her mouth fueling my anger. Understand? I understand perfectly. You're delusional if you think you can just barge in here and lay claim to what's mine. Alex has no right to this house, and neither do you. Alex finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Emma, maybe we should discuss this. Discuss? I snapped, my patience wearing thin. You think after everything, we're just going to sit down and have a chat about you handing over my house to your mistress and your other children? The woman paced around, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Look, Emma, it's simple. You've got 1 kid, a small apartment will do. We've got 3, we need the space. It's only fair. Fair? The word echoed in my mind, a cruel joke in the face of everything that was happening. Fair? You want to talk about fair? There's nothing fair about betrayal, about lies, about breaking a family. You have no idea what fair is. She turned to Alex, seeking affirmation. Tell her, Alex. Tell her we'll be moving in. She's got a week to clear out. Alex avoided my gaze, his shoulders slumped, the picture of defeat and cowardice. Emma, I don't know what to say. The standoff was tense, the air thick with unsaid words and unspoken threats. But as they left, the woman throwing a spiteful glance over her shoulder and Alex not even daring to look back, I knew that this was far from over. After the door slammed shut behind Alex and his mistress, I was left standing in the silence of my home, my mind racing. The nerve of them, coming into my house, threatening to take everything I held dear. But as the initial shock subsided, a plan began to form. It was time to reveal the truth, time to claim what was rightfully mine. The doorbell rang, its chime echoing like the start of a showdown. There they stood, Alex looking more defeated than ever, and his mistress, her arrogance undiminished. "Time's up, Emma. We're here to move in. Did you pack your stuff?" she demanded, her eyes gleaming with triumph. I stood in the doorway, my stance firm. "Actually, I didn't pack. And you're not moving in. This house is mine, and I have the documents to prove it." The woman's face faltered, confusion mixing with her anger. "What are you talking about? This is Alex's house too. We have rights." I couldn't help but smirk, the tables finally turning. "No, you see, that's where you're wrong. This house was a gift from my parents to me. Alex's name isn't on any of the documents. He has no claim over this property." Alex shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Emma, I thought we could work something out." "Work something out? After you cheated, lied, and then tried to kick me and your son out of our home?" "I don't think so, Alex." The mistress interjected, her voice shrill with panic. "This can't be happening. You're lying. Alex, tell her she's lying." But Alex remained silent, his eyes downcast, the truth of the situation finally dawning on him. "It's not a lie," I said, my voice steady. "This house is mine, and you have no legal right to be here. So, I suggest you leave before I call the police." The woman's eyes darted to Alex, seeking confirmation or maybe denial. But Alex stood silent, his head hung low, the truth too heavy to bear. "But we have a family, we need this house. You can't just throw us out," she protested, her voice tinged with desperation. "The only thing I'm throwing out is the lies," I countered. "And while we're at it, let's talk about Alex's job, shall we? He's not the high-flying executive you think he is. He's a clerk, a simple office worker. Your dreams of a lavish life in this house are just that, dreams." The revelation hit her like a physical blow, her face contorting with rage and disbelief. "A clerk? You're lying. Alex, tell her she's lying." Alex, however, remained silent, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The charade was over, the truth laid bare for all to see. "You've been living in a fantasy, fed by Alex's lies. But it ends now," I declared, my voice firm. "You have no place here. It's time for you both to leave." The confrontation was intense, the air thick with tension and unsaid words. But as they turned to leave, the mistress's parting glance was filled with venom and vows of revenge. "This isn't the end, Emma. You'll regret this," she hissed, her dreams shattered by the harsh light of truth. It was a crisp morning, the kind that usually promised a peaceful start, but peace was a luxury I could no longer afford. The sound of the doorbell shattered the calm like a rock through a window. As I opened the door, my heart sank. There she stood, Alex's mistress, her face twisted into a smirk, her children huddled behind her. "You've got some nerve, showing up here again," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The mistress didn't falter. "I've got every right, Emma. These kids," she gestured to the innocent faces behind her, "they deserve a proper home. Your home." I couldn't help but scoff. "Deserve? The only thing you deserve is a reality check. This is my house, and you're not welcome here." Her smirk widened, her voice growing louder. "Oh, I'm not welcome? We'll see about that. You think you can just sit in this big, fancy house all alone with your baby while my kids suffer? You're more heartless than I thought." Her words, sharp and accusing, were meant to wound, and they did. But I wasn't about to let her see that. Heartless? I'm not the one tearing families apart, disrupting lives. You did that all on your own. The neighbors, drawn by her shrill voice, had begun to gather, their whispers like a chorus in the background. She relished the audience, her theatrics reaching new heights. "Look at this, folks. Emma here thinks she's too good to share. Thinks this palace is only for her and her baby. What about my children? Don't they deserve a home too?" I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to slam the door in her face. "Your children deserve better, that's for sure. Better than a mother who uses them as pawns in her twisted games." She stepped closer, her eyes flashing with anger. "You think you can judge me, Emma? You, who had everything handed to her on a silver platter. My kids have had to fight for every little thing in their lives. And now, you want to deny them a roof over their heads?" I shook my head, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. "I'm not denying them anything. Their father, the man you stole from me, he's the one you should be looking at. He's the one who's failed them, and you." The mistress's face reddened, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Alex promised us a better life. He promised we'd have this house. Are you going to stand there and tell me those were all lies?" Her words hung heavy in the air, a painful reminder of Alex's betrayal. Promises from Alex aren't worth much these days, it seems. But one thing's for sure, this house isn't part of his empty promises. It's mine, and you have no claim to it. She bristled, her composure slipping. "I'm not leaving, Emma. Not until you do right by these kids. I'll camp out here if I have to. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of cold-hearted witch lives in this mansion." I stared at her, the absurdity of the situation hitting me full force. "You're going to camp out? On my property? I don't think so. This is your last warning. Leave now, or I'll call the police." Her eyes darted around, the gathered neighbors serving as her audience. But the resolve in my voice must have hit a nerve. She gathered her children, her parting shot a venomous glare. "This isn't over, Emma. You think you've won, but you've just started a war." The drama of the previous week still hung heavy in my home, like a cloud refusing to move on. I was Emma, a woman who thought she had seen it all, until the doorbell rang again, bringing a chapter one thought I had closed. There he was, Alex, standing on my doorstep, his face a mixture of regret and desperation. The sight of him, after everything, sparked a fury I hadn't known I possessed. "What are you doing here, Alex? Haven't you done enough?" I spat, my words sharp and unforgiving. He looked down, his hands fidgeting nervously. "Emma, I need to talk to you. It's important." I crossed my arms, my stance unyielding. "Talk? After you tried to take my home, after all the lies? You must be kidding." He swallowed hard, a man grasping at straws. "Please, Emma. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. I see that now. I was wrong, so wrong." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound bitter and hollow. "A mistake? Is that what you call it? You destroyed our family, Alex. You chose her, chose that life. And now you're here, what, asking for forgiveness?" His eyes met mine, a glimmer of the man I once knew flickering in their depths. "Not just forgiveness, Emma. I want to come back. I want to make things right. For you, for our son." The audacity of his request left me speechless. How could he stand there, asking for a second chance as if he could erase the past with a few words? "You want to come back? After everything? You think you can just walk back into our lives like nothing happened?" I asked, my voice rising with every word. He nodded, a desperate man clinging to a lifeline. "Yes, Emma. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try. I'll do anything, everything to make it up to you, to our son." I shook my head, the finality of my decision clear in my mind. "It's too late, Alex. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. We are moving on, without you." His shoulders slumped, defeat etched into every line of his face. "Emma, please. Don't do this. Think of our son. He needs his father. I felt a pang in my heart, for the life we could have had, for the family that was broken beyond repair. He needed his father, and where were you? With her, with them. You're not the man we need, Alex. It's time you realized that. He stood there for a moment longer, a man lost in the ruins of his own making. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the night. The final pieces of my old life had fallen away, leaving space for something new, something mine. The divorce papers were signed, and Alex was now just a person from my past, a shadow that no longer darkened my door. He was ordered to pay alimony for our son, a small justice in the grand scheme of things. Sitting in my quiet living room, I reflected on the tumultuous journey. The phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Lisa, her voice carrying the latest gossip. Hey, Emma, you won't believe this. Alex and his mistress are crammed into a tiny apartment. Word is, they do nothing but fight, day in and day out. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of vindication. Well, can't say I'm surprised. You reap what you sow, right? Lisa chuckled. True that. How are you holding up, though? All this must be tough. I took a sip of my tea, its warmth comforting. It's been a ride, Lisa. But, I'm getting there. Each day feels a bit lighter, a bit more mine. You're the strongest person I know, Emma. And hey, if you need anything, I'm just a call away, alright? Her words were a balm, soothing the lingering sting of the past. Thanks, Lisa. I really appreciate it. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, the normalcy a welcome change. After hanging up, I gazed around the room. This was my space, my sanctuary. The battles fought within these walls had left scars, but they were healing, turning into stories of strength and resilience. I picked up my camera, an old friend I had neglected. The weight of it in my hands felt right. I snapped a few pictures of the room, of my son's toys, of the life that was slowly piecing itself back together. Each click of the shutter was a declaration, a statement that while the past was a part of me, it didn't define me. As I put my son to bed that night, his tiny hand clutching my finger, I whispered promises of a future bright and unburdened. Outside, the stars twinkled, a vast canvas of possibilities stretching out before us. Alex and his mistress were just a chapter closed, a lesson learned. Our story, the one that truly mattered, was just beginning, and it was going to be a beautiful one. In the heart of the city stood a quaint toy store, a sanctuary where joy was measured in smiles and laughter. That's where my story begins, where fate decided to play its hand. I'm Lily, a 29-year-old who found solace among the aisles of toys, each one holding a story waiting to be told. It was a regular day, the store buzzing with the usual chatter, when he walked in, Jake, the man who unknowingly was about to turn my world upside down. He wandered through the aisles with a look of determination, his eyes scanning the shelves for the perfect gifts. Excuse me, he said, approaching me with a gentle smile, I'm on a mission to find the coolest toys for the children of my friends. Any recommendations? I smiled, pointing towards the latest action figures. You can't go wrong with these. Kids love them, and they're our top sellers this month. Jake picked up one of the figures, examining it with an intrigued expression. Looks like you really know your stuff. Do you enjoy working here? I laughed, a warm feeling blooming inside. I do. It's more than just a job. It's like being a part of countless happy childhood memories. But tell me more about you. Is being the cool uncle a full-time job? His laughter echoed through the store, a sound that felt oddly comforting. It feels like it sometimes. But seriously, my family is pretty big, parents, 2 younger sisters. One is about to get married and move to another city. It's chaotic, loud, but I wouldn't have it any other way. We continued to chat, our conversation flowing effortlessly. I shared my story, how life had been a solitary journey since my grandmother passed, leaving me her small, cherished house. Jake listened with genuine interest, his eyes never leaving mine. "It sounds like you've had your share of challenges," he said softly. "Your grandmother must have been a remarkable woman to raise someone as strong and kind as you." The store started to quiet down, signaling the end of the day. Our conversation, however, was far from over. "It's not often you meet someone who understands the value of family," I remarked. "Your family sounds wonderful. A bit like the big, happy family I've always imagined." Jake's gaze held a warmth that made my heart skip a beat. "They are wonderful, and a bit overwhelming at times. But you know, maybe one day you could meet them. I have a feeling they'd love you." As we parted ways that evening, the air was thick with unspoken promises and possibilities. Little did I know, this chance encounter, this hopeful meeting, was the beginning of a journey full of unexpected twists and turns. The day I was to meet Jake's family, my heart fluttered like a butterfly in a garden of hope. Dressed in my best, I rehearsed conversations and imagined laughter-filled rooms. Jake held my hand as we walked up to his family's apartment, his grip reassuring yet tense. "Ready to dive into the circus?" Jake joked, trying to lighten the mood. I squeezed his hand, a nervous smile on my face. "As ready as I'll ever be. Just promise me they won't throw any pies." The door swung open to reveal a bustling living room. Jake's mom, a stout woman with sharp eyes, scrutinized me from head to toe. His dad, a towering figure with a booming voice, offered a brief nod. And then there were Sarah and Megan, Jake's younger sisters, their eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. "Family, meet Lily. Lily, this is the crew I warned you about," Jake introduced, a hint of pride in his voice. I extended my hand, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's so nice to meet you all. I've heard so much about you." Jake's mom was the first to break the silence. "So, you're the girl who's been keeping our Jake so occupied. Tell us about yourself. Jake mentioned you work at a toy store?" I nodded, feeling their eyes on me. "Yes, I love it there. It's like being surrounded by joy every day. And, well, I was raised by my grandmother. She left me her house, and that's where Jake and I—" Sarah cut me off with a laugh that felt more like a jab. "Raised by your grandmother, huh? That explains the antique vibe you've got going on. What is this, a retro fashion statement?" The room erupted with laughter. Jake's dad chuckled. "Good one, Sarah. Lily, you'll get used to our family humor." I forced a smile, my heart sinking. This wasn't the warmth I had anticipated. It felt more like walking into a frost. Jake tried to smooth things over. "Come on, guys. Let's not start the roast just yet. Lily's got a great sense of style. Right, Lily?" But the damage was done. The evening dragged on, each minute heavier than the last. Sarah and Megan's remarks, veiled as jokes, felt like thorns. Jake's parents, though not as overt, had a dismissiveness that stung. And Jake, bless him, seemed caught between a rock and a hard place, his laughter forced, his glances apologetic. As we left that night, the door closing behind us felt like the end of a performance I never wanted to be a part of. Jake's hand in mine felt distant, and the family I had hoped to embrace seemed like a mirage that had vanished, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste of reality. "Sorry about that," Jake murmured as we walked down the corridor. "They can be a bit overwhelming. But it'll get better, I promise." I nodded, the words tasting like ash. "It's fine, Jake. Maybe it's just first meeting jitters." But deep down, I knew. This was more than jitters. This was a glimpse into a world I wasn't sure I belonged in. A world where warmth was replaced by cold judgment, and acceptance was a currency I didn't possess. And as we walked back to my quiet, humble house, I couldn't help but wonder if the fairy tale I had dreamed of was just that, a dream, now slowly dissolving into the disappointing introduction of reality. The evening I walked into my home, expecting the usual quiet comfort, only to find it disrupted, remains etched in my memory. The lights were on, a sure sign someone else was there. A sense of intrusion crept over me. I dialed Jake's number, my voice trembling with unease. "Jake, I think someone's in our house. The lights are on, and you're not home." His laughter on the other end jolted me. "Oh, that's just Sarah." I gave her our spare key. She wanted a place to chill. I stood frozen, disbelief and anger intertwining. "You gave your sister a key to our house, without asking me?" Jake's tone was dismissive. "Come on, Lily. She's my sister. Plus, it's not like she's a stranger." As I entered the living room, there she was, Sarah, lounging on our couch, my personal laptop open in front of her. The sight felt like a violation of my private space. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "That's my laptop," I said, my voice firm yet controlled. She didn't even bother looking up. "Relax, Lily. We're family now. I figured what's yours is mine, right?" That evening, when Jake returned, I confronted him. "Jake, your sister can't just barge into our house and use my things without permission. It's not right." His response was infuriating. "Lily, you're overreacting. She's just using the laptop. Don't make a big deal out of it." "But it is a big deal to me, Jake. It's about respect and privacy," I argued, my frustration growing. Jake just shook his head. "I don't see the problem here. She's family. You need to be more accommodating." From then on, Sarah's visits became a regular occurrence. She'd walk in whenever she pleased, treating our home like it was her own. It wasn't just the intrusion that bothered me, it was her complete disregard for our privacy. She'd leave dishes in the sink, move my things around, and never once asked if it was okay. Every time I brought it up with Jake, he brushed it off. "She's just comfortable here. Isn't that a good thing? Why are you so hung up on these little things?" But they weren't little things to me. They were the threads of respect and boundaries being pulled apart. My home, once my sanctuary, was now a free-for-all, and I felt like a guest in my own space. One day, I came home to find Sarah sprawled on the couch, a pile of her laundry on the living room floor. "Sarah, this isn't a laundromat. You can't just do your laundry here," I said, my patience wearing thin. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, Lily. It's not like I'm asking you to do it for me. Plus, your washer is way better than ours." I couldn't believe the audacity. This was more than just familial comfort, it was entitlement. And Jake's inability to see that, to stand up for our space, was driving a wedge between us. Weekends used to be my retreat, a time to unwind and recharge. But that changed when Jake's family decided our home was their new weekend getaway. It started one Saturday morning. I was greeted not by the quiet I cherished, but by the loud chatter and laughter of Jake's family sprawled across my living room. "Morning, Lily. Hope you don't mind, we thought we'd spend the day here. Our place is a bit cramped at the moment," Jake's mom announced cheerily as if they'd done nothing out of the ordinary. I stood there, dumbfounded, my private sanctuary turned into a public domain without my consent. Sure, I wasn't expecting visitors, but make yourselves at home," I managed to say, the words tasting bitter. Jake, who had seemingly forgotten the concept of personal space, chimed in. "Isn't it great, Lily? The more, the merrier, right?" The day dragged on, their presence an overbearing weight. The living room, once my haven of peace, was now a mess of loud conversations, clutter, and the overwhelming scent of food. They acted as if it was their right, their house. As the day turned into evening, Jake's mom called out from the chaos, "Lily, dear, could you whip up something for dinner? You're such a fantastic cook, and we're all famished." The audacity of the request left me reeling. "Actually, I was planning to order in tonight," I replied, trying to mask my frustration. Jake's dad laughed, a booming sound that filled the room. Why order when we have a chef in the house? Come on, Lily, show us what you've got. I felt trapped, my own desires and comfort overshadowed by their imposing presence. Cooking in my kitchen, I felt like a stranger, an outsider catering to the whims of uninvited guests. Later that evening, I tried to talk to Jake about it. Jake, this isn't working for me. Your family can't just take over our home every weekend. Jake, ever the family man, just shrugged. They're just being family, Lily. This is what families do. You're overthinking it. But it's our home, Jake. Our space. There should be limits, boundaries, I argued, my voice a mix of plea and demand. He didn't get it, or he chose not to. Lily, they're not doing any harm. We have the space, why not share it? I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, the sounds of their laughter and chatter a stark reminder of how my sanctuary had been breached. My home, my rules, my peace, all invaded without a second thought. And the man I shared my life with couldn't, or wouldn't, see the lines being crossed. The once peaceful sanctuary of my home had become a battlefield, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. After countless disputes over the invasion of my privacy, I had retreated to my bedroom, the only space I foolishly thought was still mine. But even that last refuge was about to be snatched away. It was early Saturday morning, the kind of morning where the world should have been still and quiet. But tranquility was a stranger in my own home. I was jolted awake by the sound of my bedroom door being flung open. Disoriented, I blinked against the harsh light as the figures of Jake's parents loomed in the doorway. What? What are you doing? My voice was barely a whisper, shock rendering me almost speechless. They didn't even flinch at my obvious discomfort. Instead, Jake's mom, with a sweep of her hand that felt like she was claiming territory, announced, "We've decided this will be our room now. It's the nicest in the house, after all." Jake's dad nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the room, not as a guest, but as someone assessing their property. "Yep, this will do. And don't worry, we left our apartment to Sarah. She needs it more than we do." Their words hit me like a physical blow. This was no ordinary intrusion, this was a full-blown takeover. My room, my private space, was being stripped away right in front of me. Shaken, I scrambled out of bed and found Jake in the kitchen, oblivious or indifferent to the chaos. "Jake, we need to talk. Now. Your parents can't just take over my room like this." Jake sipped his coffee, unfazed. "Lily, why are you making such a big deal out of this? They're just trying to be comfortable. Besides, you can stay in the attic, right?" His words stung more than I thought possible. The attic? Jake, are you listening to yourself? This is my house, and your family is treating it like a hotel. He shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes of where his loyalties lay. Well, it's their house too now. You can fix up the attic. It could be a nice project for you. I stood there, disbelief and rage coursing through me. My home, my sanctuary, was being carved up and handed out like slices of pie, and the man I had pledged my life to was holding the knife. As Jake walked away, leaving me to grapple with the reality of the situation, I realized I was alone in this fight. The home I had built, the life I had envisioned, was being dismantled, piece by piece. And the one person who should have been my partner, my ally, was the architect of my despair. But as I stood in the shell of what used to be my refuge, a fierce determination took root. This was my home, my life, and I wasn't about to let it be taken from me. The battle lines were drawn, and I, Lily, was ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The night before Jake and his family left for the wedding, the house was thick with tension and unspoken words. They laid down their plans, like a king dictating to his subjects. "We're off tomorrow, Lily, for Megan's wedding. You'll have the house to yourself for a week. Should be plenty of time to get your new attic room ready," Jake's mom declared with a smirk. Jake chimed in, a cold look in his eyes. Yeah, Lily. It's only fair. Mom and Dad need the space. It's a small sacrifice, really. Their laughter echoed through the house, a cruel soundtrack to the mockery of my life. The door closed behind them the next morning, the silence they left behind heavy with the weight of their words. But as the sound of their car faded away, a new resolve rose within me. I had always thought a big family was a blessing, but their presence in my life had turned into a curse, one I was determined to break. The first step was clear and unwavering. I marched to the local hardware store, the determination in my steps ringing louder than the jingle of the door as I entered. I need new locks for my house, I declared to the clerk, my voice a mixture of resolve and newfound strength. As I returned home, the new locks in hand, each click and turn of the screws as I installed them felt like a proclamation of my independence, a reclamation of my space. This house, filled with memories of my grandmother and the dreams I had for my own life, was mine and mine alone. With the new locks firmly in place, I turned my attention to the next task. Jake's belongings, once scattered throughout the house, were methodically packed away. Each item I placed in the boxes was like shedding a layer of the life I no longer recognized. As the week passed, my anticipation grew. The day of their return loomed over me, but the fear that once might have gripped me had transformed into something fiercer, a readiness to confront whatever came next. And then the day arrived. The sound of their car pulling up, the confused voices as they found their keys no longer worked, the rising volume as reality set in, it was a symphony of my making. What's this, Lily? Playing games now? Open this door. Jake's voice was a mix of command and desperation, his words hammering against the firm resolve that shielded me. I opened the window slightly, my voice steady and unwavering. It's no game, Jake. It's reality. The reality where I reclaim my home and my life. Your things are outside. You can take them and go. His mom's voice cut through next, sharp and accusatory. You think you can just throw us out like trash? After we welcomed you into our family? The irony of her words almost made me laugh. Welcomed? No, you invaded, you disrespected, and you overstepped every boundary. This is my home, and it's time you all accepted that. The voices rose, a cacophony of disbelief and anger. Jake's dad, his voice booming, joined in. You can't do this to us, Lily. We're family. Family sticks together. I shook my head, a slight smile playing on my lips. Family respects each other. Family supports and loves, not belittles and takes over. What you call sticking together felt more like being trapped. That's not family, that's a hostage situation. Their pleas turned into threats, their threats into insults. But with each word they hurled at me, my resolve only grew stronger. I had built a fortress, not just of locks and doors, but of self-respect and dignity. As the reality of the situation settled in, Jake's voice, once full of authority, now trembled with a hint of realization. Lily, please. Let's talk about this. We can sort it out. But the time for talking had passed long ago. There's nothing left to talk about, Jake. I gave you and your family every chance to be part of my life, my home. But you chose to treat it like a free-for-all. You chose to stand by and watch as they disrespected me, in my own home. That was your choice. Now, this is mine. The neighbors, drawn by the commotion, watched from a distance. Whispers and glances were exchanged, the drama unfolding before them, a stark reminder of how quickly the veneer of civility can crack. And when the noise became too much, when the insults and the banging on the door threatened to breach my newfound peace, I called the authorities. The arrival of the police was the final punctuation in a long and exhausting sentence. I explained the situation, my voice a testament to the journey I had been on. The officers, their faces a blend of sympathy and professionalism, turned to Jake and his family. You need to leave now. If you refuse, We'll have to take further action. As they finally collected Jake's belongings and retreated, a profound sense of calm enveloped me. The house, once a battlefield, was now quiet. The door, once a revolving entry for disrespect, was now a barrier against it. A week had passed since I took a stand, the quiet in my home a stark contrast to the turmoil that had once reigned. I was sipping my coffee, the warmth a gentle reminder of the peace I had reclaimed, when a knock shattered the tranquility. It was Sarah, her face twisted in anger, standing on my doorstep like an unwelcome storm. "Lily, you think you're so high and mighty, kicking everyone out? You're nothing but a selfish, greedy woman." Sarah spat the words out, her voice dripping with resentment. I leaned against the doorframe, my stance firm. "Sarah, this is my home, and I will not be insulted in it. Your family overstayed their welcome, and I did what was necessary." She scoffed, her laugh harsh and jarring. "Necessary? You've turned everything upside down. I had the apartment to myself, and now? Now it's a circus again. Mom, Dad, Jake, all crammed in because of you." Her words were meant to wound, but I only felt a profound sense of relief. "That's not my problem, Sarah. You all made your choices, and now you're living with them." Sarah's face reddened, her anger a tangible force. "You can't just toss us aside like this. We're family." I shook my head, a sad smile on my lips. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. I gave you all chances, but you chose to ignore them. I deserve respect and peace in my own home." Her words became a blur, insults and accusations thrown aimlessly. But they no longer touched me. I had built a wall, not just of locks and doors, but of self-respect and resolve. As she continued her tirade, I realized the truth in her words. Her anger wasn't just about being thrown out, it was about the loss of her comfort, her space. And that realization only strengthened my resolve. After what felt like an eternity, I cut her off. "Sarah, this conversation is over. Your family's actions brought you to this point. I suggest you focus on finding a solution, instead of wasting your time here." With that, I closed the door, the sound a final note to her symphony of fury. I filed for divorce, my heart heavy but certain. Jake's pleas, his family's insults, all blocked and left behind. I was free, truly free, not just from their physical presence, but from the weight of their disrespect. I started to rebuild, my home once again a sanctuary, my life my own. As days turned into weeks, the memory of them faded, like a bad dream in the morning light. My peace was hard-won, but it was mine, a testament to the strength I never knew I had. And in that peace, I found not just solace, but a profound sense of triumph. I had claimed my life back, one lock, one packed box, one signed paper at a time. And as I stood in my reclaimed space, I knew that this was just the beginning. I'm Clara, a 40-year-old French teacher. Life was pretty standard, filled with books, classes, and the occasional coffee with friends. I never expected it to take a dramatic turn until Mrs. Lefebvre, an old friend of my mother's, decided to play matchmaker. One afternoon, while I was sipping tea at my mother's house, Mrs. Lefebvre dropped by. She was a lively woman in her 60s, always with a story to tell or a plan up her sleeve. "Clara, dear, I have the perfect man for you," she exclaimed as she settled into the armchair. I chuckled, a bit skeptical. "Really, Mrs. Lefebvre? And who might this perfect man be?" She leaned in, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "My son, David. He's a widower, a wonderful father to 2 teenagers. I think you two would hit it off." I hesitated, the idea of stepping into a ready-made family seemed daunting. "I don't know, Mrs. Lefebvre. Stepping into a family, it's a lot." She waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You're a warm, loving person. And David is such a caring man. Plus, the kids are lovely, really. My mother, who had been listening quietly, joined in. Clara, it wouldn't hurt to meet him. You never know what life has in store for you. Encouraged by their enthusiasm, I agreed. A meeting was set up at a local cafe the following week. The day arrived, and I found myself sitting across from David, a man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. We talked about everything, from our jobs to our hobbies. He was a civil engineer and loved hiking, while I shared stories about my teaching and my love for French literature. Your mom tells me you're a fantastic teacher, David said, smiling warmly. I blushed slightly. Well, I love my job. Teaching French is my passion. And your mom mentioned you're quite the hiker. He laughed. Yeah, when I get the chance. But with Sophie and Max, my free time is usually spent on more family-oriented activities. The way he spoke about his children, Sophie and Max, was endearing. They were 14 and 12, stepping into the challenging teenage years. We all have our hands full with teenagers, don't we? I joked, thinking of my rowdy students. By the time we finished our coffees, I felt a connection with David, a sense of understanding and mutual respect. We agreed to meet again, and I found myself looking forward to it. After David and I got married, life settled into a comfortable routine that I cherished deeply. The addition of Sophie and Max, David's children, into my life was a source of joy, filling a gap I didn't know existed. I loved being a part of their lives, even though they never called me mom. The bond we shared was unique and special in its own way. One lazy Sunday afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen, baking cookies with Sophie. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of chocolate and vanilla. Clara, do you think these cookies will turn out okay? I'm not very good at this, Sophie said, a hint of doubt in her voice as she mixed the dough. I smiled at her. You're doing great, Sophie. Baking is like learning a new language. It takes a little practice, but you'll get the hang of it. Sophie beamed, her confidence boosted. Thanks, Clara. It's fun baking with you. Just then, Max bounded into the kitchen, his energy almost palpable. What's cooking, ladies? It smells awesome. We're making cookies. Want to help us with the decorations later? I asked, knowing his creative flair would add a fun element to our baking. Max nodded enthusiastically. Sure. I'll make them look super cool. The afternoon passed with laughter and light-hearted banter. It was moments like these that made our house a home. Later that evening, as we sat down for dinner, the conversation turned to our plans for the upcoming holiday. How about we go hiking this year? There are some great trails not far from here, David suggested, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Sophie seemed intrigued. Can we camp overnight? I've always wanted to try that. Max chimed in, yeah, and maybe do some fishing too. I watched the animated discussion, feeling a warm sense of belonging. That sounds like a great idea. A little adventure for the family, I added. David reached across the table, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. Thanks for being so open to this, Clara. I know outdoor stuff isn't really your thing. I laughed. Well, I might not be the outdoorsy type, but I'm definitely up for new experiences. Especially with you all. The dinner continued with plans and ideas being tossed around, each of us contributing to the holiday itinerary. It was a simple meal, but the warmth and love that filled the room made it memorable. That night, as David and I cleaned up the kitchen, he turned to me, his expression soft. Clara, I just want to say, you've been amazing with the kids. They've really opened up to you. I leaned against the counter, a contented sigh escaping my lips. I love them, David. They're great kids, and I just want to be there for them, in whatever way they need. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. In that embrace, I felt the strength of our family bond. It was a bond that had grown over shared experiences, mutual respect, and love. I went to bed that night feeling grateful and fulfilled. Shortly after our wedding, David's mother, Mrs. Lefevre, suffered a stroke that left her paralyzed. In the blink of an eye, our lives changed drastically. I took on the responsibility of caring for her, balancing this new role with my job as a French teacher and managing household chores. These were challenging times, but I found solace in providing comfort to someone who had welcomed me with open arms into their family. Years passed, and Mrs. Lefevre's health continued to decline. Then, one fateful morning, she passed away. The loss hit me harder than I expected. She had become like a second mother to me. The day after her passing, the house was quiet, an eerie calm that felt unnatural. I was in the kitchen, lost in my thoughts, when David and the kids came in. Their expressions were solemn, but there was a strange undercurrent of anticipation in their voices. "Mom's lawyer will be here this afternoon to discuss the will," David said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Sophie chimed in, her tone surprisingly light. "I wonder what Grandma left for us. She always said she had some savings aside." I was taken aback by their conversation. Shouldn't we be focusing on arranging a proper service for her? She was a big part of this family. David shrugged. "We'll take care of that, but there's no harm in looking ahead, Clara. Mom would have wanted us to." As the day progressed, their excitement over the inheritance became more apparent. It was as though Mrs. Lefevre's passing was merely a pathway to financial gain. I couldn't help but feel disturbed by this blatant display of greed. That evening, after the lawyer's visit, David and the kids gathered in the living room, eagerly discussing the inheritance. I stood at the doorway, listening to them. "So, we're getting a good amount, then?" Max asked, his eyes gleaming. David nodded. "Yes, enough to make some significant changes around here." Sophie's laughter filled the room. "Finally, I can get that new laptop I wanted." I stepped into the room, unable to contain my disappointment. "Is this really what's important right now? Your mother just passed away." David looked at me, his expression cold. "Clara, you wouldn't understand. This is family stuff." I felt a sting at his words. "I cared for your mother for years, David. How can you say I wouldn't understand?" He scoffed, turning away. "Just because you looked after her doesn't mean you're entitled to anything. You did what any decent person would do." In the weeks that followed, David and the kids became increasingly distant and dismissive. Their attitude towards me changed from indifference to outright rudeness. David's remarks became more cutting, and the children, following his lead, treated me with a lack of respect that I had never experienced before. One evening, as I was setting the dinner table, David walked in, his face stern. "Clara, you need to step up your game around here. The house has been a mess lately." I looked around, bewildered. The house was as tidy as it always was. "I've been doing my best, David. I don't understand what's changed." He shrugged, his voice harsh. "Just saying, you could do better. After all, it's not like you're contributing much else around here." I felt a lump form in my throat. The man I had married, the family I had embraced, were now treating me like an outsider, an unwelcome burden. The shift in my family's demeanor after Mrs. Lefevre's passing wasn't gradual, but a sudden plunge into a cold, unfeeling world. David and the children's behavior towards me transformed overnight from distant to openly hostile. Every day brought a new barrage of insults and nagging, and I was treated less like a family member and more like an unwelcome servant. One particularly harsh evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, David entered the kitchen, his face twisted in a sneer. "Clara, why is dinner not ready yet? You really can't do anything right, can you?" Stunned by his harsh tone, I replied, trying to keep my composure, "I'm doing the best I can, David. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes." He scoffed, looking around with disdain. "You know, I only tolerated you because you were useful, taking care of my mother and the kids. But now? You're just a burden." His words cut through me like a knife. I stood there, the plates in my hand feeling heavier than ever. Sophie walked in, her voice dripping with contempt. "Yeah, Clara, you should be grateful we even let you stay here. You're just a scary, old, and useless woman." Max, not to be outdone by his sister, chimed in mockingly, "Yeah, who would want you around? You're like a ghost haunting this house." Every word was a blow to my spirit. I had dedicated years of my life to this family, caring for them as my own, only to be reduced to this pitiful state. I served dinner in silence, their cruel laughter and jibes echoing around me. That night, as I lay in my bed, the day's events replayed in my mind. David's cruel declaration that I was nothing more than a now useless caretaker, Sophie's and Max's hurtful comments. It all hammered home the painful reality that the family I had loved and cared for saw me as nothing more than an expendable servant. The following days were no better. Every task I did was met with criticism and disdain. I was constantly reminded of my place in the household, a place that seemed to have no respect or kindness. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the living room, David walked in with a look of annoyance. "Clara, have you seen my blue tie? I can't seem to find it anywhere." "I washed and hung it in your closet yesterday, David," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, it's not there now. Can't you do anything right? You're just taking up space in this house," he snapped, storming off. I finished my cleaning, each sweep of the broom feeling heavier with the burden of his words. The home I once cherished now felt like a prison, filled with contempt and scorn. Living in a constant state of belittlement and disrespect had taken its toll on me. Each day in David's house was a battle against his and the children's growing cruelty. I began to contemplate the painful decision of leaving, but my worsening leg pain and the lack of financial resources made me feel trapped. One chilly morning, as I limped around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, David stormed in, his face twisted in annoyance. "Clara, why is everything taking so long? You're moving like a snail." I tried to hide my pain. "My legs aren't what they used to be, David. I'm moving as fast as I can." He rolled his eyes. "Excuses, always excuses. You're just a burden, you know that?" The words stung, but I remained silent, focusing on setting the breakfast table. Sophie and Max entered the kitchen, their expressions mirroring their father's impatience. "Ugh, why do we always have to wait for Clara? She's useless," Sophie muttered, sitting down with a huff. Max didn't bother to hide his disdain. "Yeah, if she can't even make breakfast properly, what good is she?" I served them breakfast, each word from them like a dagger to my heart. As they ate, I sat down at the far end of the table, my appetite gone. After breakfast, I retreated to my room, the pain in my legs growing with each step. The lack of empathy and the constant insults from David and the kids were unbearable. I sat on the edge of my bed, the reality of my situation sinking in. I needed to leave, but I was scared and unsure of how to proceed. Later that day, I mustered the courage to speak to David. I found him in the living room, reading a newspaper. "David, can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He glanced up, his expression one of irritation. "What is it now, Clara?" "I've been thinking, maybe it's best if I leave. I don't feel welcome here anymore," I said, my voice shaking. David looked at me, a smirk forming on his lips. "Leave? And go where? You have no money, no place to go. Your mother died without leaving you anything to inherit. You're stuck here, Clara, whether you like it or not." His words were a harsh reminder of my dire situation. I felt a sense of despair wash over me. He was right, I had nowhere to go. My job as a teacher had been my only source of income, and with my leg condition, I couldn't even do that anymore. I had to resign from school. It was a bitter, but the only right decision. The following days were a blur of household chores, nagging, and insults. David and the kids treated me with utter disregard, their words and actions reinforcing the painful truth that I was no longer a part of this family, but a mere inconvenience to them. As I struggled with my pain and loneliness, I began to secretly plan my escape. I started saving whatever little money I could, hiding it away for the day I could finally leave. The thought of freedom, of being away from the constant belittling and disrespect, was the only thing that kept me going. One afternoon, while David and the kids were out, I sat at my old laptop, nursing my aching legs. Browsing aimlessly, I discovered a website for online tutoring. A thought struck me: could I leverage my skills as a French teacher in a new, virtual setting? Hesitant, but driven by a newfound purpose, I set up a profile on the site. Experienced French teacher available for online lessons, I typed, my heart racing with both nervousness and excitement. The next few days were a whirlwind. To my amazement, requests for lessons began to pour in. My afternoons, once filled with loneliness and despair, were now occupied with teaching French to eager students from around the world. One day, as I finished a lesson, Sophie walked in, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the laptop. "What are you doing?" she asked suspiciously. "I'm teaching French online." "It's something I'm good at," I replied, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. She scoffed. "As if anyone would want to learn from you." I ignored her remark, feeling a sense of pride in my small but significant accomplishment. As weeks turned into months, my reputation as an online French tutor grew. I started earning enough to entertain the idea of independence, of a life away from the constant degradation I faced at home. The days that followed saw me juggling my newfound career with the household chores. Despite the physical pain and the emotional drain of living in a hostile environment, I found solace and strength in my teaching. Each lesson I gave was a step closer to freedom, a reminder that I was capable, valuable, and deserving of respect. The tension in the house reached its zenith the evening David announced his promotion at work. That night at dinner, the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. David, Sophie, and Max were unusually chatty, their voices laced with a smug satisfaction that sent a chill down my spine. As I served dinner, trying to ignore the dull ache in my legs, David cleared his throat, ready to make his announcement. "I've got some news. I got a promotion at work. With it, I bought a new house. Bigger, better, and it suits our new status." Sophie clapped her hands in delight. "That's amazing, Dad. When do we move?" David's gaze shifted to me, cold and calculating. "We will be moving soon. But Clara won't be joining us." The room went silent. I looked up, my heart sinking. "What do you mean, David?" He smirked, his words cutting through the air like a knife. "You're not coming, Clara. You don't belong in that part of our lives. You were useful once, but not anymore." Sophie joined in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Yeah, Clara. You're just an old, limping woman. What use would you be in our new house?" Max laughed, adding insult to injury. "You should be grateful we let you stay here this long." I stood there, the plates in my hands trembling. The pain of their words was sharper than any physical ache I had ever felt. David slid the divorce papers across the table to me. "I think it's best we part ways. You can stay here until the house is sold." Numb, I picked up the papers. My hands were shaking as I signed them. There was no point in arguing or pleading. The people I had once called family had shown their true colors, and they were ugly and cruel. The next morning, I began to put my plan into action. While David and the kids were out, I packed my belongings. Each item I placed in the suitcase was a step towards my freedom. When David and the kids returned, they found me at the door, suitcase in hand. David's expression was one of surprise and confusion. "What are you doing, Clara?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of concern. I straightened my back, facing them with a newfound strength. "I'm leaving, David. I will not stay here and be treated like a worthless burden. David scoffed. Where will you go? You have nothing. I smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. I have more than you think. I have my dignity, my skills, and I have plans. You will not see me begging. In my rented apartment, a modest but serene space, I was rebuilding my life, one online French lesson at a time. The freedom and tranquility here were in stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere I had escaped from. One evening, as I was reviewing lesson plans, my phone erupted with the frantic ringing of a call from David. His voice, laced with panic and anger, filled the room. Clara, what the hell have you done? Sending those recordings to my boss? Do you have any idea what you've caused? He bellowed, the sound of his fury resonating through the phone. I leaned back in my chair, a smirk playing on my lips. Oh, you mean the recordings of all the lovely things you and the kids said to me? Yes, I did send them. In the background, I could hear the unmistakable cries of Max and Sophie. Tell her to fix this, Dad. She's ruined everything. David's voice cracked with desperation. Clara, please. Because of those recordings, I'd been demoted. I can't afford the mortgage on the new house. You have to help us. The sounds of their pleading were music to my ears. Help you? After the way you all treated me? You made your bed, David. Now lie in it. His voice rose to a near scream. You can't do this to us. We're your family. I laughed, a deep, hearty sound that felt liberating. Family? No, family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. You and your kids were nothing but cruel and abusive. This is your karma, David. Sophie's voice cut through, shrill and pleading. Clara, please. We didn't mean any of it. We'll change, I swear. Max joined in, his voice laced with fear. Yeah, Clara, please. We're sorry. We need you. I stood up, pacing the room as I replied, sorry? Your words and actions broke me. But guess what? I picked up the pieces and put myself back together. Without you, I owe you nothing. David's voice was a mix of rage and helplessness. You're going to let us lose everything? I stopped pacing, standing tall and proud. Yes, David, I am. You and the kids have made your bed, and now you get to sleep in it. Goodbye. I hung up the phone, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. I had stood up to them, not with malice, but with the strength they never thought I had. Over the following weeks, I heard from mutual friends that David and the kids were struggling. They couldn't pay the mortgage, and the bank had taken over the house. They were forced to move into a small rented apartment, and both Sophie and Max had to take up jobs to help make ends meet. As for me, my online tutoring was flourishing. I was saving money, not just for my day-to-day needs, but for a house of my own. A place where I could live in peace, away from the shadows of my past. I remember the day Lily was born like it was yesterday. I was 8, a skinny girl with wide eyes and a head full of dreams. My parents, John and Sarah, were ordinary folks. Dad worked at a local factory, and Mom stayed at home. Life was simple until Lily came along. Look at her, Sarah. She's got your eyes, Dad had cooed, holding Lily for the first time. Mom had smiled, a tired but triumphant smile. And your nose, John. I stood by the door, clutching my ragged doll, waiting for someone to notice me. Can I see Lily? I asked timidly. Mom glanced at me, her eyes barely registering my presence. Not now, Linda. Lily needs rest, and so do I. School wasn't much better. Kids can be cruel when they smell vulnerability. Hey, Scarecrow Linda, Jack, the class bully, would sneer as he tugged at my faded dress. Did you get your clothes from the trash? I tried to ignore them, but words hurt more than punches. At home, Lily grew into a pampered princess. She'd scribble in my textbooks and giggle. "Look, Linda, I'm helping you with homework." I'd sigh. "Lily, please don't do that. I need those for school." One day, she went too far, pouring paint over my only good dress. I yelled at her, but she just cried. That's when Mom stormed in. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her eyes flashing. "Lily ruined my dress," I said, holding up the stained fabric. Mom didn't even look at the dress. "How dare you yell at your sister? Go to your room, Linda. No dessert for a week." Grandma was the only one who understood. "Don't let them get you down, Linda," she'd say. Her house was my refuge, filled with books and love. She taught me to escape into stories, to live 1,000 lives within those worn pages. The day Grandma passed away was the day I lost my true home. I remember coming back from school, my heart heavy, walking into a house filled with her absence. My parents were in the living room, already talking about her belongings. "We should start clearing out her stuff," Dad said, his voice devoid of any sadness. Mom was looking through a list. "And her library? Those dusty old books?" I lingered at the doorway, listening, a tightness growing in my chest. "Just get rid of them," Dad shrugged. "Who needs all that old paper?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "Can I have Grandma's books?" I blurted out, stepping into the room. "Please?" They both turned, almost surprised to see me. "Sure, take them," Mom said dismissively. "We don't have any use for them anyway." I spent the next days transferring Grandma's books to my room, each one a piece of her I wasn't ready to lose. Life moved on in its cruel pace. As high school came to an end, my parents made an offer I didn't expect. "We'll pay for your college," Mom announced one evening. "You can study accounting or something practical." I remember feeling a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Really? Why?" I asked. "It's our duty," Dad said. "Just don't expect any more handouts after this." College was my escape, a chance to be more than just the overlooked sister. But even that came with its price. A few weeks into my part-time job at the library, Mom cornered me. "You're making money now. It's only fair you start paying us back for your tuition." I was stunned. "But you said you'd pay for my college." "I didn't ask for this." "Don't be ungrateful," she snapped. "Half your salary, that's the deal." The injustice of it burned in me, but I had no choice. Half of what little I earned went straight into their pockets. Years passed in this exhausting cycle: work, study, pay my unfair dues. My graduation was supposed to be a celebration, but it felt more like a reminder of the shackles I couldn't escape. At the dinner table, with Lily smirking beside me, my parents dropped another bombshell. "Now that you're working full-time, we expect you to continue paying us," Dad said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "What?" I was incredulous. "But I've been paying you all through college." "When does this end?" "It ends when we say it does," Mom said coldly. "You owe us, Linda." I felt a mixture of anger and helplessness. "This isn't fair," I protested. "Life isn't fair," Dad retorted. "You live under our roof. You follow our rules." And just like that, my dreams of independence, of a life where I could be my own person, were crushed under the weight of their greed and entitlement. In my room that night, surrounded by Grandma's books, I realized the stark contrast between the warmth and love they represented and the cold, calculating nature of my own family. These books were my only legacy, the only thing that connected me to a sense of belonging, of being understood. Life after college became a monotonous cycle of work and fatigue. Every payday, the same scene would unfold at home. "Linda, have you got your paycheck yet?" Mom would ask, her hand already outstretched, the moment I stepped through the door. I'd hand over half of my earnings without a word. It had become a routine, a bitter pill I swallowed each month. One evening, I mustered the courage to confront them. "Mom, Dad, I've been thinking," I began hesitantly. "Maybe I can start keeping a bit more of my salary. I need to save up, maybe for a place of my own." Mom's expression hardened. "Your own place? Don't be ridiculous. You owe us, Linda. We paid for your education." "But I've been paying back. Isn't that enough?" I protested, feeling a surge of frustration. "Enough? You think a few $1,000s cover your debt to us?" Dad's voice rose. "We raised you, fed you, clothed you. You owe us for a lifetime." I felt my heart sink. But I never asked for any of this. I just wanted to go to college. "And who do you think paid for that? You think that was free?" Mom snapped. "No, Linda, you'll continue paying us, just as you have been." The unfairness of it all was suffocating. I had hoped, foolishly, that they might see reason, but their entitlement knew no bounds. Lily, ever the favored child, never missed a chance to taunt me. "Look at our little accountant, can't even afford a new dress," she'd sneer, flaunting the latest gadget or outfit they'd bought her. I remember one particularly hard day at work. I had stayed late, trying to finish a complex report. Exhausted, I reached home to find my family had ordered takeout, my favorite Thai food. For a moment, my spirits lifted. "Is there any left for me?" I asked, hopeful. Mom shrugged. "You should have been here earlier. Besides, you can buy your own food with your big salary." I retreated to my room, too tired to argue. Dinner that night was a stale sandwich and a cup of tea. Alone in my room, surrounded by the comforting presence of my grandmother's books, I felt the full weight of the life I was trapped in. I longed for more, for freedom, for a chance to live for myself. But every attempt to break free was met with guilt trips and reminders of a debt that I was beginning to realize might not even be mine. My life at home had become a ceaseless routine of work and servitude. Each day, I'd return from my job as an accountant, mentally drained, only to be greeted by the chaos of my family's demands. One evening, I came home to find the living room in a mess. Dad was lounging on the sofa, watching TV, while Lily was sprawled on the floor, surrounded by a pile of clothes. "Linda, you're back." Finally, Dad said without looking away from the screen. "Clean up this mess, will you? And start dinner. We're hungry." "But I've just got back from work," I protested weakly, my shoulders slumping. "Work? You call sitting in an office all day work?" Lily scoffed, not bothering to lift her gaze from her phone. "Try doing something useful for a change." Their words stung, but I was too tired to argue. Silently, I began picking up the clothes, my mind heavy with resentment. As I cooked dinner, the familiar sense of injustice gnawed at me. I was more than just their housekeeper, more than their source of income. But in their eyes, I was nothing more than an extension of their will, a means to an end. The next morning, I was met with another list of demands. "Linda, take Lily shopping today. She needs new clothes," Mom instructed as I was about to leave for work. "But I have a busy day at the office," I said, my voice strained with frustration. "Oh, what's more important? Your job or your family?" Mom retorted, her tone sharp. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. My job was important only when it benefited them. Reluctantly, I agreed to take Lily shopping after work, sacrificing the little personal time I had left. At the mall, Lily flitted from store to store, her excitement in stark contrast to my growing despair. "Isn't this dress cute, Linda?" she gushed, holding up an expensive designer dress. "Buy it for me. You owe us, after all." I looked at the price tag and felt a pang in my chest. "Lily, this is too much. I can't afford this." "Can't afford it? But you're the big earner in the family," she taunted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Stop being so stingy." I bought the dress, my heart heavy with the knowledge that this was just another link in the chain that bound me to them. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that my life had become a cycle of giving my time, my money, my energy, with nothing in return. I was trapped in a life of servitude, catering to the whims of a family that saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. The day of my 30th birthday dawned just like any other day. I woke up early, hoping maybe, just maybe, this day would be different. That my family would remember and we'd have a small celebration, a moment of happiness. I walked into the kitchen where Mom, Dad, and Lily were already having breakfast. "Good morning," I said softly. Dad glanced up. "Morning. Make sure you're not late for work." I waited, hoping for more, but there was just silence. My heart sank. They had forgotten. It was just another day for them. I tried to hide my disappointment as I prepared my breakfast. The clock ticked away, each second a reminder of how little they cared. As I was about to leave for work, I mustered up the courage to remind them. "You know, today is my birthday," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mom looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before it vanished. "Oh, is it? Well, happy birthday. Don't expect us to throw a party." Lily snickered. "Yeah, happy birthday, Linda. Maybe you can treat yourself to something nice with your big paycheck." Their words stung like 1,000 needles. I left the house, holding back tears, feeling more alone than ever. The day at work was long and tiring. When I returned home, I hoped maybe they'd have a change of heart. But the house was just as I'd left it. I found Mom, Dad, and Lily in the living room, ordering food from a fancy restaurant over the phone. My hopes dissipated like mist. "Are we expecting guests?" I asked, a glimmer of hope reigniting. "No, just felt like ordering something nice," Mom said casually. "You can join us if you want." I watched as they ordered dish after dish, my heart sinking with each click of the phone. Should I get the lobster or the steak? Lily mused aloud. "You should get both," Mom encouraged. I stood there, a bystander in my own home. They hadn't just forgotten my birthday, they didn't care. I retreated to my room, the walls echoing with their laughter and chatter. I sat on my bed, surrounded by Grandma's books, the only gifts I'd ever truly treasured. In the silence of my room, I called my Aunt Mary, the only other person who had ever shown me kindness. She answered with a warm, "Happy birthday, Linda. How are you, dear?" Her words, so simple yet so full of warmth, brought tears to my eyes. We talked for a while, and she shared stories about Grandma, bringing a smile to my face. Then she said something that stopped me cold. "You know, your grandmother would be so proud of you. She always wanted the best for you. That's why she left the money for your education." I was confused. "What money, Aunt Mary?" "The money she saved up for your college. Didn't your parents tell you? She was so determined to give you a good start in life." My world spun. Grandma had paid for my college? All these years, my parents had lied, making me believe I owed them. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. The truth was a key, unlocking the chains I'd been bound with for so long. My parents had manipulated me, used me, all based on a lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. The revelation churned in my mind, a mix of anger, betrayal, and a newfound sense of determination. I couldn't let them control me anymore. I had to break free, to find my own path. The next morning, I confronted them. "I know about the money Grandma left for my education. Why did you lie to me?" Their reactions were a mix of shock and defensiveness. "We did what we had to do," Mom said coldly. "We're your parents. It's your duty to support us." "Duty? You lied and made me your servant," I exclaimed, my voice trembling with emotion. Dad just rolled her eyes. "Drama queen. You should be grateful we let you live here." That was the final straw. I was done being their scapegoat, their cash cow. It was time for me to take control of my life. The morning after my birthday was a new beginning. The sun seemed brighter, the air fresher, as if the world was acknowledging my resolve. I had packed my things quietly, trying to avoid any early confrontations. But as I was about to leave, Mom and Lily confronted me in the hallway, blocking my path. "Where do you think you're going with those bags?" Mom asked, her eyes narrowing. "I'm leaving," I stated, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. Mom's tone turned pleading. "Linda, you can't do this to us. We're your family. Where will you go?" "Anywhere but here," I said, stepping around them. "I deserve better than this. I deserve a life." As I walked out the door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The shackles of guilt and obligation that had held me down for so long were finally broken. I didn't look back. I walked towards the bus stop, my heart filled with a mix of fear and excitement. I was stepping into the unknown, but for the first time, it was a path that I had chosen for myself. On the bus, I called a number I had written down a few months back, an advertisement for an apartment rental. The voice on the other end was friendly and understanding. By the time the bus reached my stop, I had arranged to view the apartment later that day. The apartment was small, but cozy, a stark contrast to the coldness of my family home. As I signed the lease, I felt a sense of ownership and independence I had never experienced before. That night, in my new apartment, surrounded by my grandmother's books, I finally felt at peace. I cooked a simple dinner for myself, enjoying every bite without the weight of judgment or expectation. My phone rang several times that evening, the caller ID showing my family's number. But I didn't answer. I was done letting them control my life. Instead, I curled up on the small sofa with a book, losing myself in a story of adventure and courage. It was like Grandma was there with me, her spirit encouraging me to live the life I was meant to have. In the quiet of my apartment, I made a promise to myself. I would live my life on my own terms, find my own happiness. I would no longer be the overlooked child, but a woman strong, free, and in control of her destiny. Settling into my new apartment was like starting a fresh chapter in my life. I had my own space, and for the first time, I could use my salary for myself. It was a revelation to realize how far my earnings could stretch when I wasn't giving half of it away to my parents and sister. I could afford good food, stylish clothes, and even indulge in a bit of self-care. One of my first acts of independence was giving myself a complete makeover. I got a stylish haircut, something I had always wanted but never dared to do. I bought clothes that made me feel confident and happy. Every morning, I dressed for work with a sense of pride and excitement. At work, my colleagues noticed the change immediately. "Linda, you look fantastic. What's your secret?" Sarah, one of my closest colleagues, asked me one day. "Just enjoying my life and embracing the change," I replied with a smile, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But the most important thing I did after moving out was to take my grandmother's books with me. Those books were more than just literature, they were a connection to the happiest part of my childhood and a reminder of my grandmother's love. Every evening, after returning from work, I would make myself a cup of tea and curl up with a book from Grandma's collection. It was my way of keeping her memory alive and cherishing the love for reading she had instilled in me. Life in my new apartment was peaceful and fulfilling. I relished in the small joys, like cooking my favorite meals, decorating my space, and losing myself in a good book. The sense of freedom was exhilarating. One afternoon, as I was arranging my books on a new shelf, I came across an old photo of my grandmother tucked inside a novel. Tears welled up in my eyes as I held it. I knew she would have been proud of me for finding my own way. I placed the photo on my nightstand, a nightly reminder of where I came from and the strength I carried within me. My grandmother's enduring love and the lessons she taught me were my guiding light. As days turned into weeks, I found myself evolving. I was no longer the overlooked, burdened daughter and sister. I was Linda, an independent woman who had taken control of her life. I had a job that I enjoyed, a cozy home filled with memories, and the freedom to be myself. Life was no longer about surviving, it was about living, thriving, and finding joy in the little things. My transformation was not just external, it was a deep, internal change that had reshaped my view of the world and myself. Every morning, as I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a confident, happy woman staring back at me. I was finally at peace, living a life that was truly my own. I had been living in my new apartment for a month when my phone rang one evening. The caller ID flashed my parents' number, a sight that now stirred a mix of emotions. Bracing myself, I answered. "Linda, this is ridiculous. You need to come back home. We can't manage without the money you were giving us." Mom's voice was both pleading and demanding. "I'm sorry you're finding things tough, but I've moved on. Maybe it's time you both looked for jobs," I suggested, trying to keep my voice calm. "How dare you talk to us like that? After all we've done for you?" My dad's voice boomed through the speaker. "I've done my part for years. It's time for you to take responsibility for your own lives," I replied firmly. Their response was a barrage of insults and accusations, but I held my ground. "I'm not responsible for your financial problems," I repeated before ending the call. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Opening it, I found my sister Lily standing there, her expression one of expectancy. "Linda, I need money for a new gadget. Just transfer it to me like before," she said, as if nothing had changed. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "Lily, I'm not your personal bank anymore. You should try earning your own money." Her reaction was immediate and intense. She began screaming at me, hurling insults and accusations. "You owe us. You're just a selfish, heartless monster." Her screams were so loud that they attracted the attention of my neighbors. Concerned, one of them called the police. Soon, 2 officers were at my door, questioning us about the commotion. After explaining the situation, the officers escorted Lily out, who continued her tirade even as she was led away. I blocked my family's numbers on my phone after that. I was done being their scapegoat and ATM. The next few weeks brought whispers of my family's worsening situation. Mutual acquaintances shared stories of their mounting debts and desperate attempts to find money. My parents, who had never worked a day since I started earning, were now doing odd jobs. Lily, too, found herself in a situation she had never imagined. The sister who once mocked me for my old clothes was now selling her designer outfits and expensive gadgets just to make ends meet. Despite a fleeting sense of pity, I reminded myself of their years of neglect and exploitation. They had chosen this path, and it was their responsibility to navigate it. In my world, life was blossoming. My job was going well, and I was enjoying my newfound freedom and independence. My apartment, once a distant dream, was now my haven of peace, filled with memories of my grandmother and her books. One evening, as I sat in my reading nook, a sense of profound contentment washed over me. The once overlooked and undervalued daughter had transformed into an independent woman. I had broken free from the chains of familial manipulation and emerged stronger. I'm Mary, 29, an accountant. I've always been the kind of person who thrives on order and predictability. But then, life threw me a curveball named Mike. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. The moment I walked in, I spotted him across the room, laughing loudly, the center of attention. I was content to stay in the background, but my friend, Jess, had other ideas. "Mary, you've got to meet Mike. He's hilarious," Jess insisted, dragging me over to him. I remember thinking, this is going to be awkward, but to my surprise, it wasn't. Mike was easygoing, his laughter infectious. I found myself laughing more in that one evening than I had in months. "Hey, I'm Mike." "And you are?" he asked with a smile that reached his eyes. "Mary. Nice to meet you," I replied, a bit more enthusiastically than I intended. He cracked a joke about accountants being party animals in disguise, and I couldn't help but laugh. We spent the rest of the evening chatting. He was into graphic design, loved indie music, and had a passion for cooking. I remember leaving the party feeling lighter, happier. Mike had this way of making everything seem fun and exciting. Over the next few weeks, we saw a lot of each other. He'd show up at my apartment with takeout from the newest restaurant in town or tickets to a concert. "Life's too short for routines, Mary. Gotta mix it up," he'd say. I was drawn to his spontaneity, a stark contrast to my structured life. He had this knack for pulling me out of my comfort zone, and I loved it. But I started to notice little things. Like how he'd casually drop $100 on a night out without a second thought, or how he'd switch jobs because he got bored with the old one. I tried talking to him about it once. We were at my place, and I broached the subject as delicately as I could. "Mike, don't you think you should be a bit more careful with money? And maybe stick with a job longer?" He just laughed it off. "Mary, you worry too much. Life's about having fun. Money, jobs, they come and go." I wanted to argue, to explain that that's not how the world works, but I didn't. I let it slide, telling myself that it was just Mike being Mike. When he proposed, it was out of the blue. We were walking in the park, and he just blurted it out. "Marry me, Mary. Let's make this adventure official." It was impulsive, irrational, and completely Mike. And I said yes. We moved in together, into my house. It seemed like the perfect start to our life together. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, opposites could really attract and hold together. The days of laughter and impromptu adventures with Mike gradually gave way to a sobering reality. His carefree attitude, once the source of our connection, started to feel more like a growing divide. It was a Thursday evening when the first major crack appeared. I had stayed late at work to catch up on some demanding accounts. Tired and hungry, I arrived home, hoping for a quiet night. Instead, I walked into a scene that looked like the aftermath of a shopping spree. Bags from various stores were strewn across the living room, and there was Mike, lounging on the sofa with a self-satisfied grin. "Mary, you're home. Look at these deals I found today," he exclaimed, gesturing towards the bags. I dropped my keys on the table, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "Mike, we talked about this last week, about saving money and cutting down on unnecessary expenses." He shrugged, flipping through a magazine. "Yeah, but these were on sale. Besides, we needed some of these things." I picked up a receipt from one of the bags and felt my heart sink. "Needed? Mike, these are luxury items, not essentials. We have a budget for a reason." Mike looked up, his expression shifting from casual to defensive. "Come on, Mary, don't be such a killjoy. We deserve to treat ourselves once in a while." I sighed, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's not about being a killjoy, Mike. It's about being responsible. We have bills, a mortgage, and we agreed to save for a rainy day." He rolled his eyes and tossed the magazine aside. "You always make a big deal out of everything. Can't you just relax for once?" Then, one morning, I found an envelope addressed to Mike on the dining table. It was from his workplace. Curious, I opened it and felt my world tilt. Mike had resigned from his job without a word to me. When he finally came down for breakfast, I confronted him, the letter in my hand. "Mike, what is this? You quit your job? Why didn't you discuss it with me first?" He poured himself coffee, unfazed. "Yeah, I quit. That job was a dead end, Mary. I need something better, something that excites me. But how are we going to manage our expenses? We need two incomes, Mike. You know this, I said, my voice rising with frustration. He shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. We'll figure it out. We always do. You need to stop worrying so much. How can I not worry? We have financial commitments, Mike. This is not just about you or me, it's about us, our future, I argued, trying to make him see reason. Mike set down his cup with a thud. I can't deal with this right now, Mary. You're suffocating me with all this talk about money and responsibility. I watched in disbelief as he walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen, letter in hand, feeling more alone than ever. Mike's unemployment, which initially seemed like a short-term hiccup, rapidly grew into a persistent source of stress and contention in our household. Each morning, as I prepared for work, I'd find Mike in the same spot on the couch, engrossed in either the TV or his phone. The sight became a painful reminder of our growing financial strain. Mike, it's been weeks since you quit your job. Have you started looking for something new? I asked one morning, trying to mask the concern in my voice as I adjusted my work badge. He barely glanced up from his phone. Yeah, I'm looking. Nothing's caught my eye yet. I'm waiting for the right opportunity. His nonchalant reply irked me. Right opportunity? We have bills piling up, Mike. We can't wait forever. He finally looked up, his expression a mix of annoyance and indifference. Mary, you need to chill. I know what I'm doing. I'll find something soon. Days turned into weeks, and the situation at home remained unchanged. I began to take on extra hours at work to keep up with our financial obligations, my exhaustion growing with each passing day. One evening, I came home to an unexpected scene. The living room was littered with pizza boxes and empty beer cans. Mike was sprawled on the couch, snoring lightly. The TV blared in the background. Mike, I called out, frustration evident in my tone. He stirred and blinked at me sleepily. What's up? He mumbled, rubbing his eyes. What's up? Look at this mess. And dinner? Were you planning to cook tonight? I asked, my patience wearing thin. He sat up, yawning. Oh, I forgot. Got caught up with the game. Grab something on your way home next time. I felt a surge of anger. I'm working extra hours to make ends meet, Mike. The least you could do is help around the house. He stood up, stretching lazily. I didn't ask you to work extra. You're choosing to stress yourself out. The conversation escalated quickly. Choosing to stress out? Mike, if I don't, how are we going to survive? You're sitting here doing nothing while I'm out there trying to keep us afloat. Mike's expression hardened. I'm not doing nothing. I'm trying to find a job. You think I like being stuck at home? Trying? By sitting on the couch all day? You're not even trying, Mike. This isn't what I signed up for when we got married. I shot back, my voice tinged with both anger and sadness. Mike scoffed. Well, sorry for not living up to your perfect standards, Mary. I didn't realize I married a nag. I was taken aback by his harsh words. A nag? Is it too much to ask for a partner who contributes? I don't understand how you can be so relaxed about our situation. He grabbed his jacket, heading towards the door. I need some air. I can't deal with this right now. The tension in our home had reached a boiling point. Every conversation with Mike about responsibility and our future ended in a heated argument, leaving a cold silence in its wake. I was tired, both physically from the extra hours at work and emotionally from the constant strain at home. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through bills and trying to make the numbers work, I realized something had to give. Mike, I began, my voice steady but firm, we need to talk. This can't go on any longer. He glanced up from his phone, his expression indifferent. What now, Mary? It's about your job situation. Or rather, the lack of one. It's been months, Mike. We're sinking here, and you don't seem to care, I said, the frustration evident in my tone. Mike let out a heavy sigh. Here we go again. Look, I'm trying, okay? You think I enjoy this? You think I like seeing you stressed all the time? Then do something about it. Find a job, any job. We need 2 incomes, Mike. We agreed on this when we got married, I shot back, my patience wearing thin. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You think it's so easy, huh? Just snap my fingers and a job appears? You don't get it, Mary. The market's tough. I need something that suits me. Something that suits you? I repeated, incredulous. We don't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect job, Mike. We have bills, a mortgage, responsibilities. Mike paced the room, running his hands through his hair. I can't deal with this pressure, Mary. It's constant with you. Nag, nag, nag. I stood up, facing him. This is not about nagging, Mike. This is about our life, our future. If you can't understand that, then maybe this isn't going to work. Mike stopped pacing, his eyes meeting mine. What are you saying? I took a deep breath. I'm saying that if you don't find a job, if you don't start taking our situation seriously, then maybe we need to rethink this marriage. The words hung heavy in the air between us. Mike's face hardened, and for a moment, he said nothing. Then, without a word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sat back down, my hands trembling slightly. I hadn't meant for it to come to this, but the endless cycle of arguments and indifference had worn me down. Days passed with no word from Mike. The silence was both a relief and a worry. Then, late one evening, my phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. It was the hospital. Mrs. Smith? Your husband, Mike Smith, was brought in after an accident. He's stable, but he sustained some injuries. The news hit me like a punch to the stomach. I rushed to the hospital, my mind racing with worry and 1,000 unanswered questions. The sterile, impersonal atmosphere of the hospital was a sharp contrast to the emotional turmoil I was feeling. Sitting beside Mike's hospital bed, I watched him, his leg in a bulky cast, his face reflecting pain and vulnerability. It was a side of Mike I hadn't seen before, and it stirred a complex mix of emotions within me. As Mike's eyes fluttered open, he squinted at me, confusion giving way to realization. Mary? You're here. His voice was weak, laden with a mix of guilt and relief. I forced a smile, trying to keep the conversation light. Yeah, I'm here. How are you feeling? He winced as he tried to adjust his position. Like I'd been run over. Which, I guess, isn't far from the truth. What did the doctors say? They said you were lucky. The injury could have been worse. It's a severe fracture, and you'll need time to heal, I explained, watching his face for a reaction. Mike exhaled deeply, his eyes meeting mine. Mary, I'm sorry. I've been such a fool, and now this, his voice trailed off. I sighed, feeling a wave of conflicting feelings. Mike, we can sort through all that later. Right now, you need to focus on getting better. But he persisted, a hint of urgency in his tone. No, I need to say this. I've been self-centered, and I've put you through so much. This accident, it's made me see things differently. I listened, unsure of how to respond. I appreciate you saying that, Mike. But it's going to take more than words to fix what's been broken. He nodded solemnly. I know, and I want to make it right. I'll find a job as soon as I'm able. I'll help out more around the house, whatever it takes. The conversation was briefly interrupted by the nurse who came in to check on Mike's vitals. After she left, we resumed our talk. Mike, it's not just about the job or the housework. It's about us, our relationship. We've been drifting apart, and it's going to take effort to bridge that gap, I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. He reached out, taking my hand. I know I've messed up, Mary. But this accident, lying here, all I could think about was you. How much you mean to me, and how I've taken you for granted. I felt a lump in my throat. His words were touching, yet I was cautious. I want to believe you, Mike. I really do. But we've had so many false starts. I need to see that you're serious about this change. The nurse returned, her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the heavy mood. We're going to start some mild physiotherapy soon. It'll be a journey, but you're in good hands. After she left, Mike looked at me, a newfound resolve in his eyes. I know it's going to be a long road, but I want you with me, Mary. If you're willing to give me that chance. Bringing Mike home from the hospital marked the beginning of a new, challenging chapter in our lives. His broken leg meant he was confined to the bed or the couch, and his dependence on me for the simplest of tasks was a stark change from his previous self-reliance. The first few days were a flurry of adjusting to the new routine. I juggled my work commitments with playing nurse to Mike. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Mike glaring at the TV, a frown etched on his face. Mike, how are you feeling? Do you need anything? I asked, dropping my bag and kicking off my shoes. He turned his head, his expression sour. Where have you been? I've been calling out for help to get to the bathroom, and you were nowhere. I felt a twinge of guilt mixed with frustration. I had to stay late at work, Mike. You know my job is demanding. I can't just leave whenever I want. He scoffed. Well, maybe your job shouldn't be more important than your husband. As the days went on, Mike's demands grew. He wanted specific meals at specific times, his medication handed to him on the dot, and constant attention. If something wasn't to his liking, he made sure to voice his displeasure. One Saturday, I spent hours preparing his favorite dish, hoping it would lift his spirits. As I set the plate down in front of him, he looked at it and then up at me with disdain. This is what you made? It's too salty. Can't you do anything right? I felt my patience snap. Mike, I've been running around all day, trying to take care of you and keep up with everything else. A little appreciation wouldn't hurt. He sneered, pushing the plate away. Appreciation? For this? I'm stuck in this bed because of my leg, and all I ask is for a decent meal. I stood up, my hands trembling with anger. You know what, Mike? I'm not your servant. I'm your wife, and I deserve some respect. Mike's eyes flashed with anger. Respect? You want respect? How about respecting my condition? I'm the one who's suffering here. As I walked away to cool down, I realized that the man I was trying to help was becoming increasingly unrecognizable. The sweet, apologetic person I had seen in the hospital had vanished, replaced by someone who seemed to take pleasure in belittling me at every turn. That fateful day, I returned home from work earlier than usual. The house, usually quiet during these hours, echoed with an unfamiliar sound of laughter coming from Mike's room. My heart pounding, I tiptoed closer, a sense of dread growing with each step. Peering through the slightly open door, I saw Mike, animated and cheerful, chatting on the phone. Oh yeah, I've settled in quite well here, he said with a laugh. Mary doesn't have a clue. My breath caught in my throat. Who was he talking to? What was he talking about? A cold shiver ran down my spine as I processed his words. I backed away, my mind racing, then loudly re-entered the house, slamming the door to announce my presence. I composed myself and walked into his room. Mike, hearing the door slam, quickly changed his demeanor and ended the call. Mary, you're back, he said, feigning weakness. Hey, how are you feeling? I asked, masking my turmoil with a concerned smile. Just the same, you know, he replied, avoiding my gaze. The next day, I contacted a private detective, someone I knew from a previous work case. I need you to find out everything about my husband's activities, I told him over the phone. And there's a woman he might be involved with. While the detective did his work, I played the part of the dutiful wife. It was agonizing, acting as if everything was normal when every instinct screamed that my world was falling apart. 2 weeks later, the detective got back to me. The news was worse than I had imagined. Mike had been in an accident with his mistress, who was listed in the police reports. The detective provided me with her name, and a quick search on social media revealed her profile, filled with pictures of her and Mike looking intimately close. But there was more. The detective had uncovered Mike's gambling debts, a staggering amount that threatened to drown us financially. I sat in the living room, the evidence of Mike's betrayal laid out before me, feeling a mix of anger, disbelief, and heartache. How best to unveil his deceit? How to make him realize the gravity of his betrayal? For now, I kept these thoughts to myself, waiting for the right moment to turn the tables. The morning light filtered through the curtains as I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. Entering Mike's room, where he lay with his broken leg, I braced myself for the performance of a lifetime. "Mike, I need to talk to you about something important," I said, my voice calm but firm. He looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "What now, Mary? Can't you see I'm in pain here?" I maintained my composure. "I've made a decision for your better care. You're being moved to a state medical facility tomorrow. They're equipped to handle your rehabilitation more effectively." Mike's expression turned from annoyance to panic. "What? No, you can't do that. I want to stay here, with you." "I'm sorry, Mike, but this is for the best. I'll start packing your things," I said, turning towards the door. As I closed it behind me, I heard the frantic rustling of sheets and Mike's hurried voice calling someone on the phone. "She's sending me to some facility. You have to help me." About an hour later, a car pulled up outside. Mike's mistress barged into our house, her face a mask of determination and concern. She marched directly to Mike's room, with me trailing behind. "I'm here to take him with me. He's not going to any facility," she declared, her voice laced with a sense of ownership. I followed her into the room, my heart pounding but my face calm. "I'm glad you're here. This was all a setup to get you to show your hand." Mike and his mistress exchanged a look of confusion and fear. "What are you talking about, Mary?" Mike asked, his voice quivering. I held up the evidence collected by the detective, photos of them together. "This is the proof of your affair. I'll be seeking compensation for this betrayal." The mistress laughed, though her eyes betrayed her nervousness. "I can pay whatever you want. He's coming with me." My smile was thin, but confident. "You should know, he's neck-deep in gambling debts, and without a job, he can't afford his medical bills or insurance. Are you ready to handle all that?" Her face went pale, the implications of what I'd said slowly sinking in. Mike's eyes darted between us, a look of utter helplessness on his face. "But I can't deal with all that," she stammered, her confidence crumbling. "Seems like he's your problem now," I said with a cold finality, turning to leave the room. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. I filed for divorce, ensuring I received a fair settlement for Mike's betrayal and deceit. His mistress, now burdened with his financial and medical responsibilities, quickly found herself overwhelmed. Rumors reached me over time about their strained relationship, riddled with arguments and financial woes. Mike's downfall was a tale of his own making, and his mistress was now ensnared in the web of consequences. As for me, I found solace in my newfound freedom and independence. The betrayal had been painful, a stark lesson in trust and deception. Yet, it also imparted a strength I never knew I had. I moved forward with my life, emboldened by my resilience and determined to find happiness on my own terms, free from the shadows of deceit and betrayal.